We're calling back to order to the open session, February 4th, regular Board of Education meeting. Coming out of closed session, I'd like to take the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to choose Dr. Huber. You're on the list here, so I haven't called on you. Can you take the lead, please? Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. I have to read the broadcast statement. A broadcast and recording is being made at the direction of the board, and the broadcast may be captured images and sounds of those attending the meeting. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Newsom's issued an executive order N-2920, which temporarily suspends provisions of the Brown Act relating to public meetings. As such, Folsom Cordova Unified School District board members will be conducting open session board meetings via Zoom, video teleconferencing. The meetings will also be live streamed on the district's YouTube channel. The public's health and well-being are the top priority for the Board of Trustees of Folsom Cordova Unified School District, and you are urged to take all appropriate health safety precautions. Public comments are encouraged and can be done in writing or during the virtual board meeting using the raised hand feature. Just raise your hand, we'll get you on to speak. Folsom Cordova Unified School District Board Policy 1313 promotes mutual respect, civility, orderly conduct among employees, parents, and the public. We will treat staff, parents, and members of the public with respect and expect the same in return. If any member of the public uses obscenities or communicates in a demanding, loud, insulting, and/or demeaning manner, the board will calmly and politely admonish the person to communicate civilly. Speakers who wish to make public comment to the board in Spanish or Russian will have their comments translated to English. Written comments were accepted until 3 p.m. today. These comments were emailed to the board prior to the board meeting for review and will not be read out loud during the meeting. At the direction of the board, the superintendent will call roll, and we're going to call roll right now. And we'll receive all electronic comments that's submitted by 3 p.m. today, so it pertains to the board meeting. Superintendent, please call roll.
Yes, Mr. Reed,
Here.
Mr. Short,
Here.
Mr. Hoover,
Here.
Mr. Clark,
Here.
Mr. Hoon,
Here.
and Board Member Gallant.
Here.
All are accounted for.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item 5, reporting out the closed session. Superintendent.
No action to report out tonight.
Okay. Okay, and no board president statement right now. So we'll move on to item 6, and that's adoption of the agenda.
Move it.
Do you have a motion?
I'll move it.
Second.
Okay, we'll take roll call right now. Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Hoover,
Aye.
Mr. Clark,
Aye.
Mr. Hui,
Aye.
and myself, aye. We have got the adopted agenda. And I can't see her.
It's okay.
Where are you? Oh, you're way up there. Okay, thank you. Item 7 on public participation. This is time given to speakers at the discretion of the board chairperson, which is me, that allows the public to address the board on any matter not on the agenda, but the law prohibits action by the board on any agenda items. Do we have any hands raised for this item?
There are no hands raised right now.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 8. Reports of district organizations. Student Advisory Board.
Good evening. I have a short report tonight, but the Student Advisory Board has our meeting next week, and we will be hearing from Dr. Kaligian about secondary reopening updates and continue to work on our virtual talent show. We will also have some SIB members participating in the secondary reopening video with Ms. Griffin. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. California School Employees Association.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Kaligian. This is Rob Thomas for CSEA. The updated COVID-19 plan being presented tonight provides the clearest guidance yet on how we proceed together through this challenging and upsetting time. To make the plan as successful as possible, we need to pull together. To do this, your staff needs to know our concerns will be heard and acted on. We understand that there's a lot that our district cannot control, but administrators can listen with empathy, communicate with compassion, and take action when possible. One of our biggest concerns right now is about vaccination. Even though there's a lot of unknowns, we need to hear what is known. It's important for staff to hear about your commitment to provide vaccinations as soon as possible. And the sooner we hear the outlines of the plan, the better. Thank you for all you do for our students and staff.
Thank you. Also, Cordova Education Association.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Kaligian. I've been in leadership meetings with other association leaders, not just in our county, but throughout our surrounding regions. And it's been very interesting, to say the least. We're in so many different places, and it's really made me step back and realize how grateful I am that we've been able to work through so many things in the last year with the district. That's not to say it hasn't been challenging. It has been, and I know you've heard the frustration. But I'm just grateful that we have been able to keep that relationship strong and work through all the details necessary to try and reopen our schools safely and do what's best for our students and our staff. As Mr. Thomas said, the vaccine is another big issue that we're going to be looking at. It's certainly, right at the forefront of our teachers' minds as well. But we've faced a lot of challenges together in the last year, and I know that we'll be able to continue doing that moving forward as we examine the issues around around opening secondary and around the learning recovery programs that we'll be discussing later this evening. Our district is in a much better place than many around us, and it's a testament to relationships and to the dedication of everybody involved that we've been able to get protocols in place that some districts are just beginning to look at a year into the whole pandemic. So I just wanted to take a moment tonight and express that gratitude. And that's my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelica. Also, Cordova Leadership Association.
Thank you. Good evening, board members and Dr. Kaligian. First, I want to share that 3 leaders in our district were nominated for the Association of California School Administrator Awards this year. And that includes Dr. Sarah Kaligian, Elena Cabrera, and Sarah Perenzin in our district. And they were nominated in Region 3 for Outstanding Leadership Awards. They were nominated based on exceptional leadership and dedication to student success during this difficult time. And next, I wanted to share some highlights from Vista del Lago High School of the many ways they are keeping parents, students in the community connected and informed during this time. Principal Lori Emmington keeps students connected and school culture a priority during distance learning. The newsletter featuring school updates and a personal message from Ms. Emmington, along with other important information, is sent out every Friday. Ms. Emmington communicates regularly with families and keeps them up to date on any changes or events that are taking place. Students are also kept informed through advisory as well, where teachers provide personal connection, share school news, and sometimes provide social emotional learning lessons. Advisory teachers also check in with students and find ways to maintain meaningful connection to their students. The goal is to ensure that all students know an adult on campus cares about them. Also in advisory, Vista student government and leadership classes help to maintain campus culture, even during distance learning. Vista student government creates videos featuring current events, a segment called Get to Know a Vista Teacher, where a teacher of Vista is interviewed. They profile student athletes, celebrate student achievements, and even have class competitions. Many Vista teachers support clubs that have continued to meet during the school year virtually, providing another connection for students. And additionally, Vista counselors and mental health specialists also regularly communicate and check in with students to ensure they are supported. And these are just a few of the ways that under Principal Lori Emmington's leadership, Vista del Lago focuses on connecting with students, families, and the community during this time. And I'm glad I'll be able to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you. District English Learner Advisory Committee.
Good evening, President Short, board members, Superintendent Kaligian, and esteemed colleagues. I do have a report tonight. We had our DLAC meeting on January 29th at 11:15 to 12:30. We had approximately 72 participants join the meeting, which was wonderful. A lot of topics were covered, much of which had also been shared with Superintendent's Communication Committee. But a specific notice is that our parents had the opportunity to review two board policies. One is Board Policy 6171, and had the opportunity for input, and that one is for parent engagement, and Board Policy 6174, which is EL education, and those two happen to be coming up for the board as well. They reviewed some uniform complaint procedures, looked at some initial CalPADS report, which talked about enrollment for English learners, etc. But of discussion was items related to our safety related to COVID. They received information as well regarding adult education courses, and focused some attention on the fact that, you know, we are talking about the reopening of schools and the opening of our elementary sites. We received some school reports from some parents and school staff personnel reporting. They wanted to share that one of our parents, and echoed by many, including parents and staff, that they support a suspension of state assessment, specifically regarding CASP, as it does not accurately represent our students' progress to date. They seek support for English learners with the learning online and in person, and they're grateful for the work that teachers and staff in Folsom, Cordova are doing, and want all educators to know that they appreciate them, but that EL parents are not teachers and they're doing the best they can at home with their children. They also wanted to comment that they appreciate any and all measures and steps taken to secure and protect the health and safety of their children. Thank you. And in closing, I want to invite you and announce that our next meeting is coming up on February 18th at 10 o'clock, and we will be doing some initial stakeholder input and engagement regarding LCAP. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda consent. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
We got a first and a second. I'll take roll here. Mr. Reed.
Aye.
Mr. Hoover.
Aye.
Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Mr. Huey.
Aye.
Myself, aye. We have agenda consent. Thank you. And student ally. Ally.
Aye.
Thank you. Now you got so small up there, I can hardly see you. Okay, item 10, discussion and action. Align reopening date for schools not yet open to the new 1/14/21 California Department of Public Health CDBH recommended timeline. Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Short. And we have a presentation we want to go ahead and put on the screen here of some of the highlights of the impact of the new California Department of Public Health guidance and the impact on our schools. We're going to be highlighting some of those features that are highlighted in our COVID safety plan. So Jennifer Sarin is going to join me on highlighting some of those changes. We're going to talk about the health metrics and what changes and what those impacts are. And Carrie Kay, our health coordinator, is going to walk us through that. She's also giving us the latest updates on vaccinations for our educators. And lastly, looking at the timelines and the impact of how this guidance allows districts to open after the county has been 5 days in the red tier. And that would be the motion we'd be asking for at the end of the presentation. So with that, we'll go ahead and enter into that first slide and look at some of the COVID safety plan updates. Next slide, please. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Kaligian, and good evening, board members and everyone who's joining in. I'm going to start us off with a summary of the reopening framework and how we're fulfilling those plans. On January 14th, the California Department of Public Health released this new in-person instruction framework. And this information supersedes the previous guidance that we were working from over the last several months. There have been updates and some other releases that were smaller over this past almost 11 months, but now this is a completely new format. It still includes policy and procedures and just really elaborates on everything that we're doing to try to minimize exposure. Next slide, please. Okay, and so what comes out of this is districts and schools are required to have a COVID safety plan, and it's really an updated. If you remember, we had a written worksite specific plan that we worked on last July, and then there have been little additions to it here and there. But this is the new plan now, and it consists of two parts. It's very detailed. The first part is the Cal OSHA emergency temporary standard that was released on November 30th and was effective immediately. So of course we went straight to work on being compliant with that document. That part is now referred to already as the COVID-19 Prevention Program, the CPP, and it will become part of our injury and illness prevention program for employees. It includes the district-wide procedures for prevention and the steps that we will take to respond to a positive COVID case. That includes many departments, human resources, health services, maintenance, and facilities, communications. It includes quite a few people, and it really does require that we remain compliant with confidentiality and still take care of everyone and make sure that we're keeping everything as safe as possible. The second piece to this COVID safety plan is the public health school guidance checklist. And that has some district-wide information in it as well, but this is where the site-specific procedures come in, where we address specifically, because each site is laid out differently, they have had to walk through and really look at how they're going to accommodate physical distancing and the movement throughout campus, from ingress, egress, and all of those markings and directional signage, and then get detailed even on the hygiene piece of where all the hand washing and hand sanitizing supplies are, and some other safety necessities like that. So that's very detailed for the specifics. Now, a big requirement of this new release on January 14th was that these plans need to be posted on each school's website. Schools that were open had a deadline of this past Monday, February 1st. And schools that are closed must post on their school website 5 days prior to having in-person instruction. So I'm happy to say that we did meet our February 1st deadline for the schools that are open. All of the elementary have their links to the plans on the top right corner of the column on their webpage. And currently this week, we're working on just going ahead and getting the secondary and the other schools that aren't open yet. We're just going to go ahead and post them because we work on these plans and all of these regulations simultaneously anyway, and they are prepared. So we're going to go ahead and post those in the coming days. So that'll start. We're just doing the final review and details of their specifics, and then we'll get them up there. And now, Carrie's going to share the public health information. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me this evening, and thank you to all the families and staff that are out there listening as well. So I know we've looked at numbers for months now, and we are finding ourselves back in the purple tier. We've been there for quite some time. I've heard it described as deep purple by some of my colleagues in public health. And with this new guidance that was released on January 14, it is stating that Sacramento County will need to have a case rate of 7 per 100,000 or less, and a positivity of less than 8% for 2 consecutive weeks to move back into that red tier. So that's not changed. That we've known that. But let's look at where we are currently. So Kelly, could you click on that first link? Thank you. And then we scroll down, like go halfway, and we'll come to a map, and you can pick Sacramento County there. Keep going down. You'll see actually a map of California. There you go. And I think it actually might, So-
We're right there.
There you go.
yeah, there you go. Okay, and just click there and let it update. But what that shows is the latest update. Those updates are happening on Tuesdays by the state. And so this last Tuesday, the 2nd of February, we are now in an adjusted case rate of 30.6 per 100,000 for Sacramento County, and our positivity rate is at 8.5. So that is an improvement. Things are indeed trending down. We are seeing fewer cases and we are seeing that positivity rate decrease. So that's good. And then if you go back to the slide that we were on originally, Kelly, and click on the Sacramento County Public Health link, what we'll look at is the Sacramento County Public Health metrics. And I want to take a minute to kind of explain why they're different and why it's important to look at both. So if you're looking at Sacramento County with me now, you'll see in the lower left-hand corner where it says the case rate, 21.6. Well, that's definitely lower than what's reported on the California Department of Public Health website. And then if you click up on the tab there, Kelly, that says lab testing, Sacramento County is reporting a total positivity of 7.2%. And again, that's a discrepancy and lower. So things look better when you look at the Sacramento County Public Health website. And why it's important to look at Sacramento County Public Health, and then why it's important to look at California Department of Public Health, is that essentially there's a week to 10-day lag time that is reflected in the state data. So that's why the state data right now is looking higher than what you actually see within Sacramento County. So if you will, Sacramento County's epidemiology numbers are like a windshield for us. They're showing us what we will be seeing, what will be posted for California Department of Public Health within the next week or 10 days. And so that's encouraging. So if you're kind of curious, like, well, I see what it looks like right now for the state, and the state metrics are the metrics that we will need to use to be able to move into that red tier, you can look at Sacramento County and kind of see a forecast for what's coming. So that's why it's important that they are both out there. And I hope that elicits a little bit of light on why there's the two and why there's a difference. So we can go back to the original presentation. Thank you, Kelly. One more time, we'll click out of it. But we've talked also quite a bit about surveillance testing. And I'm happy to say that there is still quite a bit of availability within Sacramento County for free surveillance testing. And they have made a few changes. They've added in a couple of clinics that have longer hours, which is great for those of us who work full days and work Monday through Friday. They recently added a testing facility in Elk Grove that actually is open Tuesday through Saturday, and it's open 12 hours, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then they have expanded the testing at Cal Expo. It is Monday through Friday, but it is also 12 hours, so 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then the other things that they have changed since the first of the year, instead of it being a test that is administered by a professional if you've gone to the surveillance testing, now it's actually a self-administered test. It is still the PCR, it is still an anterior nasal swab, but you're doing it yourself. So prior to going, you still make your appointment. The appointment making system has shifted a little bit. It's in a system called Color. And there is a video. The video's there. We don't need to watch it right now. But there's a video that you can watch ahead of time. But there is also an individual there who can coach you through the process of doing your own test. And I'm happy to say there's plenty of availability. I had a wonderful email this week from the people who coordinate the testing at Oak Hills Church here in Folsom. And they let me know that they have a capacity on the Wednesdays that they're open to screen over 500 people. And there are appointments, and they are also available to take walk-ins. And the availability is very similar in Rancho Cordova at Cordova Neighborhood Church. And again, they're available to take walk-ins as well as appointments. So that's just a little bit of a refresher about the community testing that is out there. It's surveillance testing and the availability that we have within our communities. So quickly, it's not a bullet point, but I do want to touch just a minute on vaccines, because I do know that it's something that's very much on everyone's minds, and there's concern about when it will happen and when it will be my turn. I did have a great meeting this morning with Sacramento County Public Health, and they confirmed that they are in the beginning stages of phase 1B, which is where educators are. But there's a lot of people, there's hundreds of thousands of people in Sacramento County who are part of that phase 1B. And they are starting with the folks who are over 65. And just by example, there are at least 200,000 65-year-olds and up who are eligible to get the vaccine in Sacramento County. And then in addition to those folks, they're prioritizing law enforcement and first responders. And so once they get through some of those big numbers of those folks in phase 1B, it will be opened up to educators. So at this point, it's looking like sometime in mid-February, and we'll get that green light from Sacramento County. Really, it should be at the same time that healthcare providers get that light as well. I do know there are some entities within our county that are maybe going ahead and vaccinating anybody in that phase 1B, and that's not the direction that we have been given by Sacramento County Public Health. And so again, when we get that green light, we are ready. And when I say we, I talk about not only myself, but my other licensed staff who are going to be willing to participate and partner with the county, or if we partner with one of the other healthcare entities in our communities, we will get ourselves some clinics ready and be happy to vaccinate our employees and perhaps even other people within the phase 1B category. So I know there's probably some questions coming up in a little while about vaccine, and I'll be happy to talk a little bit more later on. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think we have one more slide, Mr. Ogden.
I wanted to share with the board, looking at the metrics that Carrie was sharing, how would this impact our district with these new guidelines? So if we look at currently how we have returning secondary, we're looking at our district would need to be in purple with our guidelines that we have and remain in purple 2 weeks, or go be in purple, be reassigned to red, and then stay in red for 2 weeks for us to reopen secondary. That's what the board decided to do back in December. It's different than what the guidelines are. The guidelines have laid out a different path. So what the guidelines have laid out would be, and I'm just going to use some dates as an example here. The guidelines lay out that after you are reassigned from purple to red, you wait 5 days. But what I think we need to look at here is how do you actually transition from purple to red? Because there's a bit of a lag time there. And so that, I think, makes us conscious that we probably should reflect on how we decided to come back in December versus what CDPH guidelines would allow us to do now. So if we were to use next week as an example, and if we were to say next week, our metrics that Carrie explained, which were the state metrics, if we had an adjusted case rate of 7 or less per 100,000 and a positivity rate between 5 and 8%, that means our metric would be in red. Now, we would not be reassigned with either of these scenarios. We would still remain purple, but our metric would be red. So that would be next week. Now, let's say the following week, we remain with an adjusted case rate under 7 and a positivity rate again between 5 and 8. That would be 2 weeks where our metrics were in red. Now, imagine that goes for a third week. And on the 23rd, when the data comes out from the state, we're again with a case adjusted rate of 7 and a positivity rate between 5 and 8. Using the timeline that we developed in December, we would then be moving from purple into red on either one of these scenarios. However, in the board approved timeline from December, we would then wait 2 more weeks. However, the new CDPH guidelines allow us to have a 5-day timeline, because now that we are reassigned from purple to red, we would only need to wait 5 days rather than 2 weeks. So what I did want to share, with the board is if we look at what we, put forward in December, it's different than what we could do now with these new guidelines. And this sort of is an example if it were to happen next week with metrics. But the same rolling timeline, you could put any Tuesday in there or Wednesday in there going forward, and it would roll depending on which of those 2 formulas that the board wanted us to follow, that timeline would be the same.
And the
Alright.
next slide would take us to our recommended action from the board, which is to align the reopening date for schools not yet open to the new January 14, 2021 CDPH timeline of 5 days once we're in the red, as Mr. Ogden mapped out there, rather than waiting the full 2 weeks as we had the previous guidance we were aligned with in December.
Okay, great. Let's bring this back to the board. Any board questions of staff?
Yes, Mr. President.
Clark.
Okay, so I just need some clarification on a few things. The California Department of Public Health, their update, and I guess Carrie, you can answer this for me. That is every week, right? We get that update every week.
On Tuesdays, yes.
Okay.
They update, as does Sacramento County on Tuesdays, yes.
Oh, the Sacramento County does the same thing.
hmm
Okay, so that's a every week thing, and we kind of get a forecast from the state, and then the county will give us something a little lower. So it's obviously it's going to show that decline, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So I just wanted to get clarification on that one. Um, I'm pleased to get the information on the vaccinations for the teachers. I know that's important, and honestly, I thought they should have been the first tier, but that's just a personal thing. But now that we're in the 1B thing, and teachers that want to get the vaccine, are they going to have to go online and, like, say your CVS or your Safeway and sign up for the shot there? Or is there any idea from the district that we're going to have a centrally located spot to where teachers can come in and get vaccinated?
So I'm essentially working that from 3 angles. I am waiting still to be approved by the state as a vaccination site, Folsom, Cordova. If that happens, we would be working with the state system, which is currently something called PrEP mod. And yes, it is an appointment making. You review the vaccine information and you input any of your a little bit of health history goes in there. And then all of that is reviewed when you go get your actual first and second immunizations. So that's if we're working with the county and the state. And then there's a potential that we may be able to partner with 1 or 2 other private healthcare providers. And I would imagine that if we're partnering with them, we would be using their system, which I'm sure is quite different than what the state is using. So that's what it looks like right now. But when we get to the point of actually being approved or partnering with one of these other entities, it actually may be that everyone at that point is using the state system, which the governor rolled out. I think it was just last week. It's being trialed in Los Angeles County and San Diego County, and it's called myturn.ca.gov.
Right.
And that's so forecasting that all entities will eventually move to that scheduling platform. But yes, folks, I really think wherever you go get it, whether you're right now, if you're already in one of the groups that have been able to be vaccinated, it's an online appointment system. You review the vaccine information and put in your insurance information and kind of take it from there.
Okay, and then you mentioned something about we have to wait on the state to get an answer for us to, I guess, host the site. What's the timetable on that?
Oh, that's a magic 8-ball question. We have been in this holding pattern with them since the 18th of January. We've emailed every 2 days asking what the holdup is. And by their response, they're just waiting to confirm our address.
Oh,
So I'm not sure why that takes so long. So that won't speed up. I mean, that'll give us the green light for being a site and partnering with the state and with the county to order vaccine when it's our turn. It would not necessarily speed up our time frame for being able to vaccinate educators because we need to follow the same game plan that the county does. And so
right,
yeah,
right.
we would just be ready. Mhm.
But I'm just kind of looking at that from the California Department of Public Health and that 5-day timeline of, when we're going to possibly start. Would you say it's possible that our teachers can start getting vaccinated, let's say that 2/23 date? Because
Um,
you're talking in the middle of February now, so I'm just kind of picking a
yeah,
date there that our teachers would be eligible.
I think that's a hopeful thing. I don't want to say yes or no because
Right.
um, it's hard to tell. But when I was on my call this morning with the county, Dr. Cassirier was not on there, but many of the schools team members were, and they indicated mid-February.
Okay.
So yeah, and just want to reiterate that the vaccine is again one of those things to mitigate risk. It's not
Right.
an end all be all. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hui?
Just a few clarifying questions. I think I heard that on the secondary level, our site-specific procedures are posting within the next week. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. And I just wanted to confirm that means when we do move to red and we get through the 5 days, the site-specific procedures themselves wouldn't hold us up from reopening.
That's what we're striving for. We just want to make sure, and they are ready, so we should just move forward.
Perfect. And then for Ms. K, I have a few questions. I guess when I'm looking at the case rate, or when we're talking about being in red and being at 7 out of 100,000, are we looking at the case rate or the adjusted case rate?
We are looking at the adjusted case rate.
Perfect. And then do you happen to know if there's anywhere where we can see specific case rate information regarding Folsom and Rancho Cordova?
If we go back to that slide, Kelly, and go to the Sacramento County Public Health link, you can. It's been a while since I've looked at their specifics. Yeah, click on location. And over on that left bar, you can see it doesn't put it into the case rate per 100,000, but it does give you a case rate by city. So case rate in Rancho 3239, and then case rate in Folsom of 2731. And I would have to ask my partners at the county what those parentheses numbers indicate.
Okay, yeah, I'd be curious to know.
Yeah.
What,
You know, I'm wondering if the non-parentheses number is the number of cases total. This is me just hypothesizing. And then the parentheses number is the actual rate. So if that's the case, it looks like maybe in Rancho we're at a 4.182, and then Folsom 3.4995. So I can certainly email my colleagues and get some clarification on that. Yeah.
I would love that information. And I mean, if that is the case, that's our case rate, I mean, we're well below the 7, just at least in our area, below the 7%.
Yeah, if that's the case, if we're interpreting that correctly.
So that would be really helpful to know. And then maybe this is a silly question, but would it stand to reason that the more people that don't have symptoms or that are healthy, the more people that are healthy that go and test, the lower our case rate would be?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned there are plenty of spots to go test in the testing sites that we are typically using. Good.
Yes.
Last question.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
My last question is for Dawn. So if you had anything else, feel free.
Oh, I'll be quiet.
Okay. Dawn, maybe this is a semantics question. I'm just looking for clarification. You had mentioned the 5-day wait after we move to red as a guideline. Is it a guideline or is it a mandate or a law?
Well, that's the guidance in the new CDPH guidance. So it was a 5 days after.
Maybe the semantics question is does guidance mean the same thing as law?
It is a requirement.
Thank you. Okay, that was all.
Okay, Ms. Reed.
Thank you. Ms. K, I just want to thank you for that clarification on the state numbers versus the county numbers. I've been paying attention to the county website on a daily basis, especially on Tuesdays. And I guess I was getting a little too excited in that, I saw the positivity rate over the last 4 weeks go from 10.8 to 10 to 7.9 to 6.5. And I'm like, well, that's 2 weeks. And so I did not realize the state is lagging the county, which is disappointing. But if that's what we have to follow, I mean, obviously that's what we have to follow. But it does speak, I think, positively for where we're heading, and that is very encouraging. Um, I do have some questions about case rate, but related to a different case rate. On page 12 of the CDPH, and it starts probably on page 11 or 10, 11, 12. It indicates that when you're in the purple tier, which we are currently in, that if you have not previously opened for grades K through 6, it's now allowing you to open based on certain conditions. Well, I mean, the good news is K through 5 is already open in Folsom, Cordova, but it says K through 6. So I am seeing that as an opportunity to reopen 6th grade in hybrid expeditiously, because it appears that we have the ability to do that. In that it even says on page 10 that, again, certain conditions, but it says schools serving grades K through 6 not already open may reopen in-person instruction if the LEA completes and posts a CSP to its website homepage and submits the CSP to their LHD and the State Safe Schools for All team. What's that? And does not receive notification of a finding that the CSP is deficient within 7 business days of submission. Under these circumstances, schools serving grades K through 6 may only reopen for their K6 grade students, even if their school serves non-K6 grade students. And then it indicates on page 12 that K6 grade reopening is permitted if the case rate is less than 25. So we're not talking about a case rate of 7 now. We're talking about a case rate of 25. So, so I guess my question is there a reason why we don't have, and this may not be for Ms. K, maybe for the superintendent, is there a reason why we cannot immediately call for the reopening in hybrid of 6th grade at all of our middle schools?
And I know the new guidance addresses that, and I asked Mr. Wilson to look into that verbiage and how it would impact, because our 6th grades obviously are linked to our middle schools, not our elementary schools.
Yeah, certainly, Dr. Clegan. The way that this is written as of the update on January 14th does, as you were reading that last paragraph on page 10, the next sentence does give the example of a middle school format, saying that that would be allowed. That example of schools housing other grade levels as well. So that does indicate that 6th grades, as it is written here, would be available to open with that case rate of less than 25 per 100,000. And again, this is a change in this update from the previous one, which did state clearly that if 6th grade was not part of the elementary schools, it was not possible to open that. It had to be the part of that same school. And this is an update as of the 14th.
Okay, that is very exciting to hear. I was hoping you were going to say that. Thank you. And then, you know, the other thing that I don't know if this is a question or more an observation. You know, obviously the governor and the state public health, I mean, they keep on revising these guidance. I don't know how many times it's been revised, but you know, as you recall, back in what was the end of November, early December, they revised it to create this 2-week where you had to have 2 weeks in red. And so when we adopted our motion in December, we said, all right, when we meet the 2-week in red criteria, which then puts us where we are today, where we need to meet and vote to change that 2-week criteria to 5 days because he changed that again. You know, when we get after public comment and we get to after our final remarks, you know, I would like to throw into the motion some additional language that creates additional flexibility that we don't have to keep on coming back and adjusting the motion based on new criteria. Because for all we know, the governor may release new criteria on Friday. And then, you know, certainly wouldn't want to, and if it was something less than 5 days or something like that, I wouldn't want to have to come back and then redo our motion again. So, I would identify that. And I also, and I think it's topical to what has been advertised here or agendized here. You know, I think I also would like to amend the motion to give direction to immediately opening 6th grade. But that's all my questions. I appreciate the feedback, especially on that data, because I just wasn't understanding why those dates weren't aligning with the county data. But now I understand the dates. The state is a little bit slower than the county. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But so that's all my my questions and comments right now.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Hoover?
Thank you, sir. Let's see here. I think a lot of great questions have already been asked, so thanks to my colleagues for those. Very good to hear about vaccines, and hopefully that mid-February timeline is something we can actually hit so that we can start to snowball and really make progress here very quickly. I guess my general question, I'll only ask two because I want to move on to public comment, but my first question is, once all of our teachers, well, actually, first of all, Carrie, let me ask you this. If vaccines become available in February or mid-February, or really once they become available, does the county have a timeline for how long it would take to basically give every teacher in our district the opportunity to get a vaccine? Or do we have a timeline?
Can't nail a timeline down yet because the allocations that the county gets for a vaccine is highly unpredictable at this point. And up until recently, the direction that the counties, and that's not just Sacramento County, but counties inclusive of the state, had been given were, let's say, here's your 1,000 doses, and you'll in that, please, set aside enough for your second doses, because the 2 vaccines that are in play right now both have 2 doses. One is 21 days apart and the other is 28 days apart. And then just, I think even this week, they were told by the state, don't hold back any doses, give everything you have. So it's really hard for any entity to put a predictable timeline out there. We do know that both Moderna and Pfizer are ramping up production. We know our new administration at the national level has set a goal for immunizing. I think it's a million, isn't it? What is it? 1 million within the first 100 days? I'm not getting it right. Anyway, there's a lot of big goals out there, and I think a lot of them can be achieved. But to really nail down what it would look like for our district and our employees, I don't have enough data to be able to give you an accurate picture. But I do know that at this point, it would be shot number 1, and then a second shot for those who choose to take the vaccine 28 days later. Most likely we'd be looking at Moderna instead of Pfizer.
Once all of our teachers have the option to be vaccinated, and Carrie, this isn't necessarily for you,
okay.
But are there any reasons or roadblocks why we could not move from a hybrid model at all grade levels to a more traditional 5-day per week schedule this school year? And what would we need to do to make that happen?
I can probably start, and then others may want to chime in. Just like I previously said, it's incredible that science has gotten this vaccine, that we have emergency use authorization out there. But again, it is one of many mitigation factors that will remain in place, I think, and for the foreseeable future. It's not for the state or for the county to, or even us to roll back the social distancing guidelines, the masking requirements, the increased hand hygiene, and the air filtration safety measures that we have in place. I think it'll be a little bit longer before we see those things rolled back.
Okay, and then I guess my last question, I might have more later, but this week a school district in Southern California reopened its secondary schools. They're in a very similar position to us in the from the standpoint that when they were in the red tier, they did reopen their elementary schools, but not their secondary schools. They are saying that they are in compliance with the new CDPH guidelines as being reopened. And just curious if any of our team has looked into that situation yet and has any initial thoughts. Obviously, I don't expect anyone to be an expert on that case since it just happened, but wanted to see if there was any thoughts on that school district and if it's something that we could study further.
I think we could find out more from the district. I believe it's Capistrano, and I'm not really sure of how they were able to, proceed in their county for seems like, are they looking at a different set of metrics than we are through their county? That part we haven't studied yet.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clark.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. One is the surveillance testing and the self-swabbing. It's still the same turnaround time to get your results, right? Nothing changes with that. It's basically
Yes,
the same test, right? But you're doing
it
it
is.
yourself.
Yes,
Okay.
and I've heard that turnaround times are still 48 to 72 hours. Occasionally, they come back a lot faster than that, and even through some of the other testing entities, if you go through your healthcare provider, I think it's in the 24-hour range at this point.
Okay, and I'm just kind of curious, and in either the Folsom site or the Rancho Cordova site, um, how many folks do you think you're getting on that? I think it's every Tuesday. How many folks do you see going through there getting their testing done? Is it a
Um,
significant amount or?
Well, since we don't have access to their appointments, that's through the county and through the color system,
Okay.
which is their new appointment system. I don't have that information. I do know that the county shared with us this morning in our call that 2 weeks ago, as a county, they were processing 55,000 tests a week, and now they are processing 20,000 a week.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
My next question is for Don, and I just kind of thought about it, and we were talking about teachers and uh, the MOU. Do we have an MOU in place as to when we can open or the scheduled opening or?
The schedule of opening is really a board decision. It's an essential
Okay,
educational decision the board makes.
okay,
And then when the board makes that decision, we bargain with the unit the impacts and effects of the board's
so
decision.
that's something that still needs to be bargained.
We would go back and bargain the impacts and effects of the decision. So
Okay,
the decision would be the board's, and then we would bargain the impacts and effects of your decision.
okay, I just, for some crazy reason, I thought we had something in place. Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, Mr. Hoover.
Sorry, Carrie, I forgot to ask. Once our teachers are eligible, or it's available for our teachers, the vaccine, will our substitute teachers be getting that same priority? And are there any challenges there for making sure that the clinics know they are teachers? Or I just want to make sure that our subs are getting that too. So
That's a great question. And if we're going through Sacramento County and my team gets to be a part of that process, then certainly we would prioritize them like we would our other educators. Because I know some of our subs are in the classrooms right now, for a variety of reasons. And so, short answer, yes. Long answer is they would need to. It just depends on which entity we end up partnering with, I think. But yes, I would hope so.
Thank you.
Good question.
Very good. Any other board questions? I'm gonna
Mr.
move
Short,
on.
I just had one question.
Okay, Ali. Yeah.
I'm a bit confused on the adjusted case rate. Why is it important, and why was it added to the new requirements to move down to?
So it's not an addition. We've always had to look at the state data and not the county data to move. I think the lag time is what's probably changed a little bit. I think it didn't used to be 7 to 10 days. And the adjusted case rate is the state adjusts by, I think, overall number of tests. So they divide they look for X differently than the county does.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know it's all a little bit gray and cloudy.
Okay.
President Short,
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to make a comment too. I know we were getting clarification on the new guidance about grade 6. And, from what Mr. Wilson read, there is the allowance to do that. The piece that we're not sure of is do they have to be in a stable cohort at that grade level, even if they're at the middle school, meaning they're with the, same teacher or class. And I think we only have one middle school that has teachers dedicated to just one grade level. That would be moot once we're in the red tier, but that for that metric of 25 cases per 100,000, we would have to get clarification because our middle schools, our teachers are teaching multiple grade levels and our kids are mixing, except I think at Folsom Middle. Is that correct? Folsom Middle is the only one that I think has the teachers dedicated to just one grade level. So I would want to seek that clarification from CDPH. And and we certainly will research that, but I just wanted to put that out there. I don't think it gets down to that level of specificity, but we would research that.
That'd be good.
Is it possible to indicate that's our interpretation and you're confirm? I'd like them to know how we're interpreting it and with a direction that we'd like to move forward, rather than what's your interpretation of this? Because if you let them opine, it may not be. They may not understand what we're looking at accomplishing here. But so it's California Public Health is who you would have to consult with.
Yeah.
And also with Sac County Public Health.
But I guess I don't understand why that would be an issue, because I mean, we have school districts, depending on where you stand in the city of Folsom, you could literally throw a rock into 2 different school districts. And they're operating in purple right now. And they don't have stable cohorts. So I'm not sure what basis they would have to suggest that that's not acceptable.
Other than they opened when the metric was a different color in their county. But I think we present our case and say this is what we're looking at, and we'll just confirm.
Yeah, and that's my only question I have is the recommended motion says that we can open up under the new guidelines. Is that incorporated based on our interpretation? Because it's a gray area.
Right.
Yeah.
And gray areas in the law, sometimes we can interpret them the way we see fit, but it'd be good for clarification purposes. So that's my only question. With that, we don't need to amend the motion because it is inclusive. Is that correct? I mean, it's saying use the new guidelines.
I still think we need to amend that.
I would want to
Yeah,
be very clear.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
And I think we need to be specific if we're
Right.
going to amend the motion for that, but also allow us the ability to confirm that
Right.
with CDPH and SCPH.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Also, just to interject, I don't believe that 6th grade is team anymore. I don't believe 6th grade is teamed anymore at Folsom Middle. I reached out to Dr. Daniels, but I do not believe that's the case anymore, that there are just 6th grade teachers dedicated to only 6th grade. classes any longer. So I'll double check that, but I don't believe that's the case any longer.
Saying they are or they're not?
They are not. They are not teamed any longer, and as only 6th grade teachers.
So they're mixed.
They are mixed, just like all the other middle schools. Yes.
President Short.
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, I mean, I guess even if they're mixed, we should be able to get 6th graders back if we're reading the guideline as we are. We have the technology to have people in the classroom and people at home. So I don't see why that would be an issue if in any school there's no stable cohort.
Mr. President.
Yes.
I just want to add on to this, because I think Mr. Reed makes an important point. I don't, I think we interpret the guidelines, the plain language of the guidelines. Gray areas we should take the opportunity to interpret those the way we want to interpret them.
Yeah.
So, I would not want to base the motion on the permission of CDPH. I think consulting with them is fine. We can ask them, but the reality is that document is what the guidelines are. So if it's not in there, it's not against the rules. So I would say let's move forward, but we're welcome to get their take on it as well. But that shouldn't be dependent on whether we move forward or not.
Okay. Okay, let's if we can move on to get to public comment now. Is this a good time to hear what the public has to say?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Clark.
before you do that, good Lord, I was just thinking about the vaccinations for the teachers, and I'm just, if Carrie did she leave us? Is Carrie still around?
He's still there.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm still here. Yep.
Okay, just a quick question about our teachers actually getting the vaccine, and how are we going to prioritize those teachers, like the ones that are teaching right now? I mean, would they actually be the first in line to get that? Because I would actually, honestly, prefer that if we can do that.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that are being discussed and plans that are being made. Nothing has been finalized about like a prioritization list. But I think we still need to kind of look at what number of doses will we have, when we'll be able to give them, and those kinds of things. But I hear I hear and agree.
But is that something that we can take into consideration, those teachers that are already on campus and teaching?
I think potentially. I know we've also been doing some data gathering for SCOE, because SCOE is looking at this from a county-wide perspective of educators. So potentially we can. I know in the county we are the only public school district that is open, but we're not the only. There's plenty of private districts, private schools that are open.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
That's it. I'm done.
All
I
right.
promise.
Any other? Okay.
I'll still be here.
Thank you, Carrie, so much. Let's move on to the public comment. Do we have any raised hands?
Yes, we have one raised hand at the moment. It is, a couple. The first one is iPhone.
Okay. iPhone, are you there?
Hi there.
State your name, please.
I'm I was can I start, or
Yes, just state your name, please, other than iPhone.
I just said I'm Jennifer Geyer.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm commenting for a few reasons. I kind of listened to all the board meetings, and I have to say that congratulations, Tim Hui. You're a breath of fresh air on this board. I really appreciate it. All the other board members that are fighting for these kids, my heart, I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of you. I do want to mention that I know you guys are following these guidelines, and I know that schools that surround our district, including Roseville, have decided to keep their schools open 5 days a week without following some of the guidelines. Is that an option for us? Is that something that we can consider? Because they've gotten approval for it, and now they are all staying open 5 days a week, and that's secondary education. And I'd also hope that we can change the wording of returning back to school just during a grading period, because that's what I was told by my high school when I spoke with the principal last week, that they believe that only we can return during a grading period. So if that is an issue, I would love for that to change. And I'd also hope, I like all the suggestions about schools reopening and trying to see what fall looks like. And a lot of parents are making decisions for next year. And I would hope that maybe you guys can find solutions on how to open full time instead of all the parameters that are keeping us closed. So if you could try to consider maybe outdoor education in the fall when the weather is better, things that would allow our secondary kids to go back because it's so desperately needed. And I know you guys have heard that over and over again, but I can't reiterate it enough how much my children need to go back. And if they cannot go back to FCUSD, I'm going to have to find another option. And I know a lot of parents are considering the same thing. So I appreciate all the work you guys are doing to fight for the kids. Please put them first in everything that you guys are doing, because sometimes I feel like they get missed. So I appreciate your work and thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have another speaker?
Yes, the next speaker is Claudia's iPhone.
Go ahead, Claudia.
Hi, thank you. Just going to comment once again on my never-ending quest for help for our special needs children who are continually dismissed and put on the back burner. Told on October 19th, my grandson would be able to go back to school. His class was canceled for lack of staffing, I was told. It is now February 4th, and there seems to be no progress made in that area whatsoever. So we are coming up to an entire school year that, well, actually 12 months, that my grandson, a severely autistic child, has not had in-person education. I'm just appalled at the lack of concern and consideration. I hear it at the end of each of the board meeting. Wow, we've got to do something for our special needs kids. But what happens for my grandson is exactly nothing. So I am so dismayed. And as far as pulling him out and sending him to a private school or a charter school, we don't have those kind of options with special needs children. Very, very few options. So we are so dependent on the Folsom Cordova School District to help those kids. But yet I don't see it happening. Governor Newsom said quite a long time ago, I believe back in September, that the special needs kids could go back. And yet, you know, month after month after month, this school district does not prioritize that, does not have that as something for most of our special needs kids. About half are in class. So please, once again, when you're making decisions, do not forget those children who cannot even speak. They cannot speak for themselves, and they have to rely on their parents and their grandparents and their teachers and their board to do it for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Next speaker.
We do not have any other hands raised.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you. We'll
Oh,
bring it
wait,
back.
hold on just a second. Sorry. We just had one pop up. That's okay. It's Jennifer's iPad.
Okay. Jennifer, are you there?
Hello, my name is Jennifer Barclay. I appreciate your time. I've spoken once prior at the school board, one of the prior school board meetings. I've been attending diligently since March of last year. I even attended on the East Coast when it was midnight and I was falling asleep after probably about 5 hours of a board meeting. I've been patient and I've been understanding. I've been optimistic, but I'm done. I cannot stand quiet anymore. I wrote you, as well as Principal Daniels, as well as I believe the school counselor this week. Not once did I get a response from anyone on the board. I did get a response and a quick call from the counselor who talked me down a bit off my ledge. But the inequality that this is creating among the education within our population within Folsom and Rancho Cordova is unacceptable. You have the option, you have the ability to do what you need to do for our kids. I moved to Folsom primarily because of the ability to raise a nice family here and have a good school and education system, and that is not what we are getting. I do appreciate all the effort that you guys are setting forth, but I'm tired. I'm at a loss. A 20-year technical person at a technical company in this area cannot teach my 7-year-old daughter well enough to have her pass classes. I cannot. And this must change. We need your help. We need to open. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Yes, our next speaker is Chris Bertelli.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Chris, you there?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that Board Member Clark asked an excellent question about whether or not an MOU had been reached between the FCEA and the district regarding the in-person hybrid learning that would happen at secondary schools pursuant to the resolution that the board already passed. And he did not get an answer to his question. The answer was the board sets policy and an MOU is then developed relative to that policy. Well, you've set a board policy. You have already passed a resolution about secondary schools coming back into session. There should be an MOU already in place that would govern the return of teachers to the classroom pursuant to that board policy. Just wanted to point out that Mr. Clark did not get an answer to his question.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Jen.
Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Jen Tarbox. And first off, I just wanted to say that tonight was a breath of fresh air. For the first time, many of us parents felt supported in what we've been fighting for our students. I'm parent of 2 secondary students in the high school and FCUSD. I want to thank Huey and Reed and Hoover. I can't say it enough. This tonight was a million times different from what we've been experiencing. We feel that you're on our side and you want to open. I just urge the rest of you to please take into consideration, and what I've not heard is do not forget about the statistics of suicide and depression, kids dropping out of athletics, academics struggling. When you are going back and forth on this gray area, if you have the opportunity to open, and trust me, there is a huge surge of parents, as you've heard tonight. We are pushing forward. We want what's best for our kids, and don't ever underestimate what a parent can do for their child. So if you've got this gray area and you have the opportunity to put these kids in class, I urge you to do that, because all the other things that are knocking them down, again, depression, suicide, academic, athletics, that has got to be the consideration. That is what you guys are here for. You're here to support them. Thank you again for those that spoke out tonight in support of our children in secondary education, because it's been months of feeling like they were left behind and the kids were giving up. I can go home to my 2 high schoolers tonight and tell them that they have support and that there's hope and a chance. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
There are no other hands raised right now.
Oh, great. Okay, well, thank you everybody for your comments. We'll move it back to the board for final board comments and direction. Do I have any?
Mr. President,
Mr. Clark, go
I
ahead.
am, I listened to Mr. Bertelli and maybe go back to Don to see if we can get a definitive answer on whether we have an MOU in place or if there was something that maybe we overlooked at a prior board meeting. I'm just kind of curious to see if we have one.
The distance learning MOU does have that timeline in it, but at that time we did not have this guidance or regulation from the California Department of Health.
Okay.
You have a responsibility to consider that when you make decisions.
Okay.
And so you could make a decision, and we would need to bargain the impacts and effects of that decision.
All right. All right. Hopefully that would that'll work for me, actually. So here we are discussing this and making a decision. What's positive is that the numbers are dropping, and every Tuesday they're just dropping even more, and that gets me excited. about that. I do support this 5-day timeline to get our kids back in. I know that we have all the necessary safety precautions in place. We're kind of on the back end of the cold and flu season, which I had a concern about back in December. Um, you know, eh, teachers are going to be vaccinated. I've been pushing for that. I think what we need to do now is just focus on getting our kids back in. Albeit a hybrid model, I mean, it's a start. Kids are going to start to interact. Um, I know that they're going through withdrawals. I know they're going through withdrawals with sports, the social interaction, even the visual and performing arts programs. I know they're going through it, and we got to get them back in and get them going. Um, so anyway, I support this. Um, I support the fact that we need to make amendments to Mr. Reed's motion whenever you make it. So that's just my statement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Hoover.
Thank you, Mr. Short. So just a few things here. I mean, listening to public comment, obviously, to Jennifer Geyer's point about other districts continuing their 5-day model. I completely hear you on that. And, for everything I'm hearing is that they will be getting a special carve out for districts that went to a 5-day-a-week model will get to keep their 5-day-a-week model, but districts that don't have a 5-day-a-week model won't get to have one. And it's just this ongoing, just never-ending inequality and inequitability of guidelines and guidances. I mean, it's just out of control. And while not all of that is within our hands, I think it's just important, at least from my perspective, for the public to know that I am doing everything that I can to figure out how we can work through these. But we really need the state to step up and make things fair. It makes zero sense that you can safely operate a high school in Purple in El Dorado Hills or Placer County, but you can't in Folsom. It makes absolutely no sense. The guidelines are completely arbitrary, and I am hoping that the state very soon and very quickly does the right thing in that regard. In regards to our special needs students, particularly those with high needs, I've asked this question so many times, and I know the answer, so I'm not going to ask it again. I know that the current problem is finding teachers to fill these spots so that we can open these cohorts. But the question I do want to ask tonight in regards to the special needs students is, can we reopen the MOU and renegotiate a new MOU that gets rid of the actual barrier, which is that teaching in our classrooms is optional for our cohorts? It is, when we passed that MOU, we were in a very different place. It was, we were going into the holidays or coming up on the holidays. We didn't have a vaccine out. Our numbers were not dropping. They were going the other direction. Today, we're in a very different place. So I guess my question is, can we reopen that contract and renegotiate with our FCEA a contract that gets those teachers back in the classroom?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reed?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Can I get an answer on that? I don't know.
Sure.
It's an actual question.
Okay.
Well, maybe Mr. Ogden and then Ms. Wesson.
Okay.
We've been negotiating MOUs since March of last year. So as things change, conditions change, we've continually looked at the new conditions and tried to do what's best for kids and keep our staff safe. So yeah, we absolutely could revisit MOUs.
Okay. I would suggest that I would request that we discuss this at our next board meeting, reopening that MOU or renegotiating it or readdressing it, whatever we want to call it, but to start that conversation, because I think we're in very different times than we were then. And then, sorry, just to finish my comments, thanks for that response. Jennifer Barclays, I absolutely feel everything that she was saying. Every single option needs to be on the table. We need to be exploring every avenue to do what every health expert in the country is now recommending that we do, which is open our schools and get our kids back in the classroom. I felt this way for a long time, but there really is no excuse at this point. And so my last request would be that at our next board meeting, I would love if our staff could put together a report and an analysis of what the district is doing in Coronado to reopen their secondary high schools. From a outsider's perspective, I don't know what interpretations they're using. I don't know who they've been talking to. I don't know the details. Maybe they're doing it the right way, maybe they're not. But we need to explore every option. So if we could get an update on that, and if it's something that we could emulate or not, or we shouldn't emulate at our next board meeting, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Reed.
Thank you. Actually, I want to build off of some of the comments Mr. Hoover just raised related to our neighboring school districts in El Dorado and Placer County. And please don't take it the wrong way. I'm very happy for them that they are where they are. Obviously, when the governor created these colored tier systems on July 17th, I believe it was, that Sacramento County was put in purple and Placer and El Dorado counties were put in red, and I think one of them was in orange even. And they were able to operate that in the tier structure for a better part of 3 months before they fell into purple. Whereas Sacramento County, has been essentially in purple the entire time except for about 3.5 weeks, where we went to red, and I think it was late October, early November. But needless to say, I'm frustrated. I maybe would go as far as saying I'm mad or angry that we are put in this scenario where we are in purple and Placer and El Dorado counties are in purple, that we at FCUSD have gone above and beyond what's required by state law in safety measures, and including the MERV 13 filters and replacing HVAC units and the like. I would argue perhaps that we've done more than some of the schools districts in Placer than El Dorado County. I believe we're more prepared to operate safely than some of those school districts. And yet we're sitting here with our secondary schools closed while they can operate their secondary schools. And there's no scientific model or explanation of why that is able to happen other than an arbitrary political decision by the state or the governor. And I don't know how to how we resolve this. And so if the board was open to having a special meeting where we ask our legal counsel to attend, and whether it's open or closed session, I suppose it might have to be closed session, and discuss what our legal options are. Potentially, do we have any legal recourse that we might be able to pursue against the governor or the state on what I presume would be an equal protection argument? I don't know. But that's why I think would be helpful to get some feedback from our legal counsel and at least exploring what our options are. So that's, I guess I don't have any questions, but that's my frustration that I wanted to share, and perhaps see if the board was open to a special meeting with our legal counsel.
Mr. President,
Yeah, Mr. Clark.
Yeah, I actually agree with Mr. Reed. I'm all for a special meeting on that, but I don't think we need to have a closed session. I think actually it might be a good idea if we had an open session and open it up for dialogue, especially for some folks who may want to attend that to have some comments. So I support you on that, and let's make that happen. Hopefully, we'll get the rest of the board to support it as well.
Okay. Mr. Hui.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of supporting a meeting, a special meeting, I'm absolutely in favor of that. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate at that same meeting to discuss potentially an action item of bringing sixth grade back on campus. I don't know if that's, I guess, a question for the superintendent, maybe.
And we'll have more information that we could bring back and have that discussion. I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
I had a couple other comments, but I don't know if we want to continue the.
Well, we're on
discussion first
final
about-
comments and direction
Okay.
on this item.
Okay,
if
so yeah, first of all, Board Member Reed, absolutely, I think it's a great idea. Sorry, Vice President Reed. I certainly also support making sure that we reopen 5 days after we move to red. And I just want to say, Claudia, I hear you. And I also know that my hearing you doesn't change your reality, and I'm sorry for that. I think we'll have more to talk about during a different part of this agenda. At least I know that I will in regards to special ed. But I just want you to know, I hope we can do everything we can to help get your grandson back in the classroom, and that it's not just talk this week. So thank you for continuing to advocate for him and for being a community member that is advocating for all of our special needs children. I really do appreciate that. That's it for me. Thanks.
Okay. Any other final comments?
I just have one comment.
Allie, do you have any?
Yeah, to what Mr. Hoover was saying, it's frustrating because it feels like we're so close to achieving this goal of reopening, but the target keeps moving. And all I can say again is students are struggling. There's a complete lack of motivation, and we're running out of time. Time is of the essence right now, and each minute we're out of school is another minute of isolation for my peers. So every minute counts. It really does. And I will support the new 5-day timeline.
Thank you. Okay, I'll make my final comments. I think my same sentiments with my colleagues here for a long time. We all know what's best for our kids is to get them back to school as quickly as possible and safe. We're hearing all the things of suicide and isolation, disengagement, loss of learning. We just know it's not good. So, as a board and as for my opinion too, we need to do whatever it takes to get these kids back to school in an engaged in classroom setting where we can get the kids back to learning, be engaged. The social emotional part is so imperative. But that said, we also want to do it in a safe in a safe manner. But as we heard tonight, there's so many inconsistencies at the state and county. They're just disparate problems. And I agree with our board here, Mr. Reed, bringing up that special meeting in regards to the board and our special counsel to look at avenues of what's going on with the governor. And it's just a mess. I really do, because it really hamstrings all our kids, everything that we're doing here, and it's just very frustrating. And I've heard you're saying you're actually angry. I'm angry too, and it's just appalling to me that we're supposed to be in a recovery state from a pandemic, and it seems like we're just kind of floundering along at the state level. So I would be in support of that special meeting. I think we'll give clear direction to staff to have that put together as soon as possible. That's the direction I'm hearing. Also, the direction of I am in support of this 5-day CDBH, and I do agree with Ms. Reed and the board here that we should try to create it where we don't have to keep coming back every time. We should be having the flexibility to move forward as quickly as possible without having meeting after meeting after meeting just to change a couple criteria. So I think that's a good goal also. It really saddens me to hear about the special education. I was involved in bringing the SELPA and the special education to help our kids here over the years. And when those kids really need our attention, they really do need to be in classroom, especially for our severe autistic, all our severe. It's just that is supposed to be. We should be really helping whatever we can with cohorts. And I hear from staff that we can reopen the MOU and renegotiate, and hopefully, like Mr. Hoover said, we're at a different time now. Different times we're heading in the right direction. Hopefully, our teachers and our staff have seen what we're doing as far as safety and PPE is being effective. Our numbers are showing it. So we do have great concerns for our babies safe. Hopefully, we can go back to the table and do whatever we can for our special education, our special needs kids. So I think that's one other direction I'm hearing tonight that we should definitely do. Um, as far as the large districts and small districts, and all at the beginning, um, where it's inconsistent because we're even allowed to be open elementary when the 1 day waiver compared to even in our own regions, other school sites that have Title I schools don't even have their kids in school, which the essential workers and the essential kids are being impacted huge. The Latino group is like 3 to 1. And so it's across the board. I heard that from our delegate assembly meeting the other day that everybody's frustrated. So I think we've reached the maximum. We need to do whatever it takes. We're here for our kids. We're here to make sure this happens. So I think we're at our wits' end. So with that said, I want to have a motion, and it sounds like we have an amendment to the sixth.
Yeah, I have.
So I'm looking for a motion and for the board to make a decision.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I move the Board of Education align reopening date for schools not yet open to new 1/14/21 CDPH recommended timeline or the earliest day possible under any future directives issued by the governor or the state. Additionally, staff is directed to take all necessary actions required to open sixth grade in hybrid instruction at the earliest possible date based on the new guidance.
I will second that.
I have a first and a second. And I'm going to call for the vote here.
Can I just ask a point of clarification?
Point of clarification, sir. Go ahead.
To Mr. Huey's point earlier, I'm taking this as, we're voting on this tonight to move forward. I don't think it should need to be brought up again in a future meeting, but I just want to clarify with the superintendent that that is the interpretation of what's happening.
Superintendent, clarification.
Read that part of the motion again, please, Mr. Reed.
Sure. Additionally, staff is directed to take all necessary actions required to open sixth grade in hybrid instruction at the earliest possible date based on the new guidance.
So I'm taking this as soon as we hit the 25.
Right, we're at
100,000.
We're at 28 right now,
Right.
or 30, or whatever.
As soon as we drop below that threshold, then staff is directed to move forward.
Correct.
That's how I'm just checking if everyone's on the same page.
I just want to make sure, and maybe I need to hear from Jennifer Sarin what other requirements are there, because I'm not opposing that. I just want to make sure if we're committing to something, if there's another approval we need from local public health. Do you know, Jennifer, if there's another?
And I'm looking at it because we're discussing it. It looks like in the purple tier, if the school wasn't already open, it has to be approved by local public health. We have to submit this COVID safety plan for their approval, and that takes at least 7 days, and then they may come back to us with questions or revisions. There might be some time going by there. It won't simply be just post the plan and open. So because I know that sixth grade falls within that K6, but it also looks like because that sixth grade is held at schools that aren't open yet, that's part of what we're going to have to inquire about and submit a plan.
So perhaps while the staff is working on that pursuant to the guidelines, if we are going to have a special meeting, perhaps we can get an update on where the staff is on that at that special meeting.
Yes, and I think that's what Mr. Hui was asking for too, that we could give that update at that special meeting.
Perfect.
Does that sound all doable to
Great,
staff?
thank you.
Is everybody clear on the motion? Okay, we have a first from a motion from Mr. Reed, a second by Mr. Clark. I'm going to take a roll call and vote. I'm moving forward with that motion. Mr. Reed.
Aye.
Mr. Hoover.
Aye.
Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Mr. Hui.
Aye.
And President Short. Aye. So we have a
Board
motion.
member go on?
And Ally.
Aye.
Oh. Aye. We got an aye from the student. Okay. Now we got a consensus. All right. Well, very good discussion. I'm glad that we're moving forward. Moving on to the next item, discussion action item number 10B, approve California Highway Patrol CHP Transportation Inspection Findings Report. Superintendent.
Yes, the California Highway Patrol conducts regular inspections, and they do a terminal and a carrier inspection. So they're inspecting the mechanical side as well as the driver's side of compliance. And we rated conditional on the terminal inspection, and which requires a reinspection in 6 months, and an unsatisfactory on the carrier inspection, which requires a reinspection in 4 months. Ms. Crawford, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, can give a little bit more detail, but we are required to bring the findings report to the board.
Okay.
Thank you and good evening. We actually have a letter from the Department of the California Highway Patrol that we are required to read as part of this finding report. And it will kind of give a little bit more information as to what that unsatisfactory condition, what that means, and what our next steps are. So on January 15th of 2021, the Valley Division Motor Carrier Safety Unit conducted a school bus carrier inspection at your facility located at 11458 Elk Circle in Rancho Cordova, California. The carrier inspection disclosed unsatisfactory conditions in the controlled substance and alcohol testing program. As a result, an unsatisfactory carrier rating was assigned. The principal areas of noncompliance in the carrier inspection were failure to obtain a pre-employment drug test result prior to a driver performing a safety-sensitive function, failure to ensure all drivers or covered employees are enrolled in a random testing pool, and failure to ensure that every driver selected for random drug and alcohol testing undergoes testing during selection periods. And then enclosed is a copy of the carrier inspection report, which is also attached to this agenda item. In the event that your organization does not institute immediate remedial action and upgrade the controlled substance and alcohol testing program to acceptable standards, it is the department's intention to initiate a complaint through the district attorney's office. So that is the report. That is the direction from the Department of California Highway Patrol. So we are currently working with our reporting company that works with us and is a liaison to the CHP. We are revamping our processes, how we report, how we are verifying that the report has actually been submitted and accepted for all drivers within the state alcohol and controlled substance testing program. And then we will be submitting all of the required documents at our next scheduled inspection.
Is that right? Is that it? Okay. Do we have any board questions to staff? Do I have any? I'm hearing none. Okay. Let's any public comment. Do we have any raised hands?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay. Let's bring it back to board. Any final comments or direction? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
We got Mr. Reed. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Hoover, second. We'll go to a vote. Mr. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Hoover?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Aye.
And another aye. Ally?
Aye.
All right, I didn't forget you this time. So you're on there. So great. We're moving on to our next agenda item. Be discussion number 11. Item A, registration information for fall of 2021. Superintendent?
Yes, as we're preparing for we're doing registration as we're speaking now for elementaries and our secondaries. And I know there's a lot of questions of what will the classrooms look like? What will we be allowed to do come fall? So I've asked Mr. Wilson and Dr. Huber to give an overview of what we're doing currently and what we're planning for, and the accommodations that we will have to have in place for having in-person instruction and continuing some type of virtual academy in the future if that's a choice that parents still want to make, even when we're allowed to be back in a 5-day-a-week traditional setting. So with that, Mr. Wilson.
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Clegan. So as Dr. Clegan just pointed out, that what we are doing here is showing our typical timelines for registration, regardless of how we open. But it is truly our wish and our hope and our plans right now to open in the traditional sense coming back for the next school year. We'll be working, of course, in conjunction with the CDPH, the County Office of Education, and throughout the summer, making sure that we're on track to do just that. And in terms of any changes that should hinder that progress of opening up in a traditional model, we'll be keeping the board apprised of any of those changes as we go through this remainder of this year and throughout the summer. With all of that said, I want to go through some of the timelines that we have here that are again, very traditional in the sense of what we do every year. So for the elementary, all the sites in January and February, registration packets were distributed to families on timelines that work with each of the sites, so within a few days of each other. And February 1st, just a few days ago, our online registration began, and it is called InfoSnap. Many parents and school staff are extremely familiar with that program at this point. I believe we're in year 3 of implementation. Secondary, the sites started distributing their registration paperwork on February 1st through the 19th, and being distributed to families as we speak for the middles and high schools. And as with elementary, secondary opened their InfoSnap on February 1st. And that is consistent with Rancho Cordova as well. And we have the start date of school as the first day of instruction being August 11th, 2021. In reference to what Dr. Collegia mentioned regarding contingencies for students who are not comfortable or families who are not comfortable coming back in person, we are working on developing a virtual academy that will look very similar to what our distance learning format looks like right now. Fortunately, all of our educators are very well versed in all methods of instruction at this point, whether that be in person, whether that be distance learning, and all the technologies that come back with that. So we are in good shape in terms of training, in terms of our educators' ability to, I don't like using this word, but pivot. So we are confident that our virtual academy will be robust. It will be run extremely well and be there and available for the students that wish to do that when we return in a traditional model. So happy to take any questions on this, but again, these are routine timelines that we have on the schedule here, and we're in the midst of it right now.
Thank you. Any board questions?
I have some questions.
Mr. Hui.
I mean, so I guess one of the questions is, we're moving forward with the Virtual Learning Academy, but people are currently registering for classes. So what are people supposed to do that are planning on going to the Virtual Learning Academy, but are in the midst of registration right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, registering all students, regardless of choice of whether they think they're going to be making that choice to go to Virtual Academy, need to register with their current school, their home school right now. One of the concerns about opening up registration to a virtual academy right now is that we are several months away from that first day of school. And the ability to, we have two different ways we could look at this. One, we could register for virtual academy right now, and in that 7 months before we open back up, many families could change their minds, and that is harder to undo than the other way. So if we plan for staffing and plan for our ability to fill our schools with our students in person, we can flip the other way and remove those students and put them to a virtual academy due to the nature of how we do staffing, much easier than the other way on doing a virtual academy. And then at the last minute, they go, oh, never mind, I want to come in person. That's a very difficult road to go down at that time.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So any family that at this point thinks they want to be in the virtual academy, they should register at their home school.
Their home school, absolutely.
And then at some point we'll have registration open up for that. I guess I am wondering, because there are so many moving parts still. You know, you mentioned we're working with a typical timeline. I mean, I guess in a time that's anything but typical, what would it take to move the registration date back 1-2 months to give families time to actually consider what they need to do?
So good question. So there's two pieces of that. Number one, regardless of whether they choose in person or virtual, they need to register. And in terms of registering, we always go homeschool first, and then we make decisions such as school choice or whatever they're doing. The reason for the timelines is honestly goes into an HR situation where we have notification to employees, we have timelines, we have we need to know where we're placing employees and how many employees we need at each site at that time. And unfortunately, we are tied to those timelines for labor law and other requirements through HR. I'm getting a nod over here from Mr. Ogden, so I'm on the right track here. But there are a lot of moving pieces in that, and one of the big pieces is the HR timelines that we must follow for hiring and movement of places and filling those positions that are difficult to fill.
Okay, and maybe Mr. Ogden, if you could follow up with that. You know, I'm looking for any wiggle room here. Part of the reason is I hear from a lot of families that right now are trying to figure out, are they coming to our district next fall?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fair question because they don't know what things are going to look like. And I mean, it's why we need to do everything we can to get open now, so we have a sense of what that is. I don't want to lose those families, but I do want to give them every option they have. If they have to decide in the next week and a half if they're going to come here, and we lose families because they couldn't make that decision quick enough, that's untenable to me. So again, I guess it's kind of this question of, it's an HR issue, but is there any way we could push it back? What would it actually entail?
The timelines we have really are ed code driven timelines. So we have to follow those. Those aren't timelines we could change. This allows us to basically look at staffing models prior to those timelines and make the correct decisions for staffing for next year.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The timelines that we currently have where our registration ends, those timelines themselves are dictated by the ed code?
Those give us time to make decisions so we can make our decisions and meet ed code timelines.
Okay.
For notifying employees.
You know, I guess maybe what I'm asking is, maybe it's at the special meeting, because by the next time we come back, it's going to be really close. I know it'll be a lot more work for us to figure that out, but what's the absolute latest date we could figure that out by? And I'd like to give families that amount of time. So if it's possible to come back with if it's an extra 2 weeks for families, I think that's an important 2 weeks. I won't belabor that anymore now. I appreciate the feedback. A couple other questions for me. There's a lot of misinformation, I think, right now about vaccinations and our district requiring vaccinations for children in order to be on a school campus. I would just like for that to be dispelled by whoever may need to.
Yeah, vaccinations. And Carrie, I know she stepped away for a moment, but there is nothing that we can do to require vaccinations for children. Right now, the vaccines that are currently approved are not approved for children under 17. My understanding, the current Moderna and Pfizer. But if there is a requirement for vaccines, it would come from the state, such as our DPT and TB and all those other vaccines that are required at particular grade levels. So the COVID vaccine is not one of those, and nor is it available for children under 17.
Right. Perfect. So yes, I think that's really important. Families know that is not a requirement in order to be in school in person next year. Um, I think that's it for me right now, Mr.
Okay.
President Short.
Any other board questions? It's just a discussion item.
Sure. Yeah, I'll ask. Are we going to do public comment as well, or
Yes.
Okay. I'll just ask a quick question, and then I'll save my comments. If for any reason, and again, I fully support a traditional schedule in the fall. I want, I would say it would need to be a really good reason to not do that. But if for any reason a traditional schedule is not possible in the fall, does our district, are we thinking about, are we considering, or do we have a plan B for a model that maximizes in-person instruction with a 5-day per week system that is not the hybrid that we chose to do this year? I guess that would be my question.
Sure.
So that would be a discussion we'd bring back to the board as we did this last summer when we were talking about the different schedules and came to agreement on the schedule we currently have for elementary hybrid and secondary hybrid. We would re-look at that at the board level for those types of schedules. We'd bring a recommendation to look at how we maximize 5 days in person and adjust it accordingly if it's not a traditional schedule.
That's great. I appreciate that. And I would just say that I think, we've learned a lot in the last year. Some things, I guess my point that I'm trying to make is when we have that discussion, I assume it'll be, well, hopefully sooner rather than later, but when we have that discussion about what model we're choosing for the fall, I would love to see multiple options on the table that we can discuss, as opposed to one option that this maybe staff might recommend it, but one option that then the board kind of goes around the room and kind of discusses random parts of it. I think it would be really great. Now the staff can still recommend their preferred option. I don't have a problem with that, but it would be great to have a few different options if we're looking at the guidelines in the future and going, well, this might not be exactly normal, but these are the ways that we can, these are a few of the different ways we could approach the situation. I just want it because I really want parents and families to be able to give feedback on that. Because last year it was, and granted, we didn't know really what we were doing. We're figuring it out too, but last year it was just very much, this is kind of it. Let's discuss it. We did have some options on some of the things, but if we can try to give as much opportunity for public input as possible, I guess is what I'm looking for. Thank you, though. I appreciate the response.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover. Yep. Mr. Reed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was interesting. Probably about a week ago, someone I knew reached out to me and said, "What are we going to do in the fall?" And regarding education. And my initial response was, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Well, with the start, are we going to be in hybrid or distance learning?" And honestly, perhaps I'm overly optimistic. I hadn't even thought of that possibility because in my mind, we're going to open in a full traditional 5-day a week schedule. But I guess to that person's point, we can't predict the future. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with these variants that are out there. I mean, I continue to remain optimistic and say, well, we've got a vaccine. It's just a distribution issue now, a production and distribution issue. And, we can resolve all the vaccination issues with production and distribution in 7 months. So I continue to believe we will open. But, hopefully that's not Pollyannish. But, reflecting back over the past year, there is one thing that I think we as a board made a mistake on. And that particularly is when we established the virtual academy, we didn't immediately ask both the parents, or not the parents, the students, well, I guess it is the parents/students and the teachers for their primary preference, and then populated the schedule in July based on in the classes based on the virtual academy versus those who want to be in attendance. I suspect if we had, it would have been a seamless transition when we were in red to perhaps be able to accommodate that. But, I mean, it's hindsight now. There's nothing you can do about what happened in the past, but what we can do is what are we going to do in the future? And, I just want to, I guess, encourage that we don't wait so long in if in deciding how we're going to proceed with the virtual academy. I like the virtual academy, by the way. I see if the state's allowing us to maintain a virtual academy, I think that should be a permanent feature, even when the pandemic's gone, to allow that to be an option, because some students have thrived in the distance learning. But that being said, I think if we could try to do something along those lines, if things aren't as good as we hope they will be, that might be helpful. So just an observation, and I appreciate if someone disagrees with me, but anyway, that's my observation.
Mr. Barker, you?
No.
Okay.
I did have one more question. I apologize.
The question's wrong question.
What? Say that again?
Wrong question. So.
Okay. And I thought it was getting a little bit clear to me, the registration pushback date, and the more I think about it, the more fuzzy I get. I imagine that's probably how a lot of us feel right now in this situation. I guess one thing, Dawn, that I'm wondering about pushing that registration date back is that we have the date so that we have some time to allow for staffing, planning, HR planning, if I'm understanding it correctly. And there is some ed code guidelines, requiring that we're registered by a certain date. If we're allowing people to register for the Virtual Learning Academy after they've registered for their homeschool, I'm thinking, isn't that going to disrupt the staffing as is?
Well, this was the first time someone's asked me, let's look at this timeline, because the ed code drives one timeline. We do have contract language that drives transfer language and surplusing timeline. So there's a couple of timelines in place here. So, we would need some time as a staff to look at these timelines and see what we could do.
And I hope this is fair to ask. How much time do you need? Because we've got, I think, until the 18th until families are supposed to register.
I really would have to sit down and work with my staff on that.
Would it be possible next week during that special meeting to give an update on the timeline? Is that okay, Dr. Killigan?
That would be reasonable.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. The only question Ali, do you have any questions before I go on?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. I hear the same thing here. I think that families need to know. I think it's really helpful to have a goal, say 5 days in the fall. I know we should try to do that. And whatever we can do, as Mr. Hoover said, and Mr. Reed, whatever we can do to have those options and bring that quicker than later so that parents can make decisions. Because, this cloud continually going on to the next year seems like I'm optimistic too, like Mr. Reed and everybody else here. Well, hopefully the vaccines will work and everything else, but we just don't have a crystal ball. But it seems like we could put a goalpost out there saying this is where our ultimate goal is, and in hopes that the parents make those decisions early on to get the registry, like Mr. Hui is looking for that time. I think whatever we could do there that would be helpful for parents to make decisions, because it is very frustrating not knowing going there. But again, I would like to hear what staff, giving staff direction, come back and give us some clear understanding of what options we do have and not. And I think that'd be good to add that to our special board meeting. So those are only questions I'm hearing right now. We have any public comment?
Yes, the first person is Chris.
Okay, Chris?
Hi, thanks again. Just to Mr. Ogden's point, I think what he's referring to is the March 15th notice obligation of the district. If the district is going to potentially lay off a teacher, it has to notify them by March 15th. And by pushing back the date of registration, you push back the staffing. Kind of all the staffing questions, and you end up having to send out a bunch of notices that will never actually be issued come the time that you're actually working on finalizing the budget. And so I get that. But as a parent of someone's going to be going into the 10th grade, it's the frustrating part is we've been told that we can't have any one-on-one time with our counselor at the high school. So mapping out my child's kind of high school, her career is difficult. Because we don't have access to the counselor one-on-one. And there are some videos we can watch to help do that. President Short, was really glad to hear you mention bringing back options sooner rather than later. I think the very first option that staff needs to focus on is the likelihood that distancing, at least distancing, perhaps distancing, masking, and other things will probably still be required into the fall. And if you're going to open the schools back in the fall 5 days a week, be prepared for the fact that you're not going to be able to fill classrooms with a full complement of students. How do you plan on bringing all the students back to campus? Or how many can you bring back to your campus at one time, given, let's say, current social distancing requirements? Start there. So that way we at least have some idea of what it might look like in the fall if we can't bring everybody back on a traditional kind of the way we knew it prior to this fall. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Ruth.
Hey, Bruce, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, this is Ruth. I want to start by thanking everyone this evening. This meeting has been really a light in a situation where I also have reached a place of a lot of frustration and challenges and struggles. So I want to recognize and just thank all of you for your commitment and how much work you've done. I had the opportunity to speak with some families in the Elk Grove School District, and we are definitely trailblazing ahead of where they're at. And I feel for those families because they haven't done even a percentage of what you all have accomplished. So I wanted to thank you for that. I would also like to echo Mr. Reed's thoughts on knowing Plan B. I think I definitely want to hope and that we're going to have 5 days a week and kids are going to be back. But I also desperately need to know what a hybrid schedule will look like. I think that one of the benefits my high schooler has done well with, because she goes to Vista and she's had access to her classes every single day. Whereas my middle schoolers are really struggling for many reasons. And one of those is the schedule, the amount of time and breaks that there are, the transitions, the every other day, not being able to have access to the same class each day. All of those things I've identified as things that contribute to some of the struggles and challenges we have. And I would just love if the work that you're all doing can happen before the summer break so that teachers have the opportunity to be part of those discussions and decisions. I know that they have a lot of expertise in knowing how our children can learn best and what that structure needs to look like. And I really hope that those committees will be working from now to the end of school so that we have that set before the summer. So thank you all again, and I appreciate the time to speak.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Carissa.
Carissa?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Barely. Can you turn it up?
I will. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I would like to suggest for Virtual Academy in the fall that there be a special ed case manager solely dedicated to the students with IEPs who do choose to be enrolled in Virtual Academy. As a SPED teacher right now, trying to absorb the caseload of my own school as well as the charter students, it is exhausting, and I don't really think it's in the students' best interest to have a case manager be managing their IEP who knows nothing about them. I think there should be a designated case manager for Virtual Academy. It would allow for better support and communication for students, parents, families, and they could actually be a part of that community right now, whereas the two are very separate. I have to chase down charter teachers, get input from parents. I don't have access to the curriculum. There's so many barriers that don't allow me to fully support students who are in the charter program. And try as I might, there's so much I'm limited by right now. And so I think if Virtual Academy is going to be an option, that there should be a designated case manager for various grade levels for those students so that they can get the best support possible. That's what their IEP is there for. It entitles them to all the supports necessary to succeed. And I just don't think that a teacher who's not involved with the Virtual Academy would be able to do that as well as someone who is part of that, who has access to the classes, the teachers, the programs, and things like that. So I'd really like that to be taken into consideration for next year moving forward, especially if we're still going to have a large portion of SPED students not coming back, which I know personally, I have a lot of families not returning. I think it would be a really great option for them to have someone dedicated solely to them to focus on their students' needs, who's not juggling their own site's needs and meeting those students' IEPs and goals, and then trying to work with a whole new set of students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. How many do we have in the pipeline?
We have one more hand raised at this time,
Okay.
and it is iPhone.
Okay, please state your name.
Hi, it's Jennifer Geyer again.
Okay.
I wanted to talk on this topic because I was really hoping, I heard you guys talk about parents making decisions, and I'm actually one of those parents that came on today. I mean, I listen every time, but I came on today specifically to kind of hear what your guys' number one goal for the fall was. So I was really hoping to get clarification. And I know a lot of parents that are listening tonight, before they register their children for Folsom Cordova Unified, they really kind of want to know what the goal is going to be. And I know you guys kind of gone back and forth about saying that, yes, we would like to, but we don't have a crystal ball and we can't tell the future. But you can tell us what your number one goal is and then have all the other plans below that if that's not possible. So I would hope that maybe you guys could reiterate tonight what your number one goal is for the fall, if it's possible. And if it's 5 days a week, what that plan looks like. I just have to make a decision in the next 2 weeks. And I really trusted you guys this year, and it was completely let down because I had an option to put my daughter in a private school. And so that's what I'm considering now. And I know a lot of parents are as well. And I would love for you guys to make a definitive decision on just what your plan A is. And if that's 5 days a week, I think that would be meaningful to a lot of parents listening tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is a discussion item. We don't have any action, but I think we can at least get a poll or at least a consensus. But we can't do a definitive decision on a discussion item. But we'll do our best. Okay. And any other speakers?
No other hands are raised.
Okay, I'll bring it back for board final comments. I think we can probably at least do what the feedback we did have. You want to go first, Mr. Hoover? Yes.
Sure. Thank you. First, I just did have one question because when we're talking about, if, when we're talking about options and schedules, I wanted to ask the superintendent or Jim, someone in public comment mentioned something about the differences between the block schedule at Vista and then, kind of the multiple periods at other classes and how the hybrid really does work better in the block schedule. I guess my question is, in our discussion of schedules, when we're talking about the fall, whenever that time comes, can the board discuss changing a schedule at a school site, or is that something that the board can decide, or is that something that needs to be bargained, or both? I guess is my question. How would that work?
I would say both, because there is contractual language on the number of contacts that teachers have in the different schedules, and that already lives in the collective bargaining agreement. But can the board discuss schedules? We've done that in the past.
Right.
We did a pretty lengthy analysis of Folsom High schedule a couple years back and examined that. And we had board members actually sitting on that
Okay.
committee to do that. So I would think it's a combination of both.
Okay, that's helpful. Because when we discussed the schedules for this hybrid, it was we kept the same period. We didn't change any of the structure, and so I just wanted to clarify the process. So just in terms of my comments, I'll probably keep it pretty short. It's been a pretty long night, but I just want to make it clear from my standpoint that I categorically support and want and really expect not only a 5-day schedule, but a traditional full-time instructional schedule. Now, so that is my number one goal. I realize I'm realistic. I'm a pragmatist. Like, I understand that we don't have a crystal ball, but I am a parent in this district. I am registering my kids in this district because that's what I'm going to fight for. And I believe a lot of this board will fight for that as well. And that is my number one goal. Is I want a traditional 5-day per week schedule to the greatest extent possible. And anything below that would be discussed at that time. But that's my goal. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Mr. Park.
Yeah, I actually agree with Mr. Hoover. I think my number one priority is to get all the kids back on full time, 5 days a week. But it was just something that I believe it was Mr. Bertelli that talked about what would we do with masks, social distancing, if that happened. Or I just don't know how it would happen, but I think it's something that we can discuss. I also think that maybe we do need to have a plan B just in case things. And I'm going to be totally optimistic with the vaccines and everything come out, and people getting their shots and everything. I just think that maybe we ought to look at a plan B hybrid schedule. But just for the record, I am on board with the 5-day a week full schedule for our kids. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Park. Mr. Hui?
Yeah, for me, it's very clear the goal, which is, it sounds like what has already been stated, which is to open to the maximum extent allowable. To me, I have every reason to believe that would be a full 5 days a week across every campus, other than our virtual learning academy. So that's what I'm shooting for. Certainly there could be roadblocks in the way. I think we will do whatever we can to get over those roadblocks. Board Member Clark, I absolutely agree about the plan B. I would almost say it's irresponsible not to have one in the condition that we've been in this last year. So we do need to do some work to have some options in case things don't go the way we'd like them. So that's it. I'm working toward a full 5-day a week open for every student.
Yeah, I don't know if I can state it any different than my colleagues. But yes, my number one priority for the fall is a 5-day, full day traditional schedule. And I agree with my colleagues that we should be prepared for a plan B that hopefully will just collect dust and we'll never need. But but the plan B, I would prefer that to include a 5-day schedule as well. So not what we have currently, but a 5-day schedule of whatever that would be the recommendation that would come back to the board. So that's my goal and my plan B.
Okay. Allie?
I don't have much to say, but obviously kids need to be back in school. And I won't be here to discuss the traditional schedule in the summer. I'll be leaving, but I'm fully on board with the 5 days.
That's good to hear. President's last comments. I've been on saying all along, we got to get right now we're going through recovery, and I'm optimistic that the vaccines and we're going to have to make sure that we all feel comfortable with the safety, but going back to as normal as possible. And sometimes, as you've seen, disasters and flood victims and fire victims, it takes a while to recover. But our kids are suffered enough, and we need to get back as quickly as possible and safely as possible with the 5 day. That would be our number one goal, is to go back to traditional as much as possible, most extent possible. And I think that's going to be doable. I think as we learn, as I've been talking to my doctor, actually, I've experienced the virus, and it's not a flu, but it is something that we do need to contend with. And as my doctor said, and other people, this virus is going to be here next year, the following year, and the following year. We're going to have to learn how to live with this. We have to protect our folks at risk and everybody at risk. And if we can do this in a safe manner, getting back 5 days a week is so much better, because of what we're seeing in the next subject here coming up, learning loss and suicides. We have to get the 5 days back as soon as possible. But again, plan B, again, knowing as a disaster consultant and recoveries of disasters, we always have to have a plan just in case we just don't understand. Sometimes Mother Nature takes over. So, but let's make that goal. Let's have our parents understand. This board, I think, is very supportive of making that happening as much as possible. So this is a discussion item. I think that's all we have. Is there any other comments, final comments? So we'll move on to the next item. Okay, so this is the one we're talking about, discussion 11B, proposal for learning loss mitigation support for our students. Superintendent?
Yes, and we can go ahead and put up the presentation, Kelly. Tonight's topic is a discussion item. So it's laying out an overall plan of what's happening now as we are creating interventions for students academically, social emotionally, and it can happen in various formats. It's happening in a virtual setting. It's happening in person as we speak. It can happen outside of the school day. It can happen during the school day. So what we're looking at and what we're exploring right now are a variety of options. And Mr. Wilson and Dr. Huber are going to share a little bit about the plan of what's happening now and what our goals are for the next few months and into the summer and beyond.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Klegian, and I'll add that Dr. Pease will be joining us on a few slides as well to help present this. The first thing that we put in here, first the topic learning loss mitigation. That it actually is not a term that we coined. This is taken directly from the CDE's website, and I'll reference that a couple times going through this presentation. But this quote from Education Week back in August of 2020 pretty much sums up what every educator is aware of right now, and how we need to respond, or the need for response to the social, the emotional, and the academic needs of our students due to the pandemic. And a few things we wanted to point out on this particular quote. I won't read the whole thing to us, but that educators are aware and they do know what it takes. And the four pieces that is pointed out in this quote are a solid curriculum, a commitment to grade level teaching, strategies to engage students, and how do we track down students and engage the ones that are not showing up for either remote or hybrid. And to reiterate what Dr. Klegian said, these things are happening currently. We are not waiting for this plan to be put in place. We're not waiting for everything to be developed. It is currently ongoing. Our educators are doing everything within their power to make these things occur. So next slide, please. Again, the focus on learning loss mitigation funding, the specific funding tied to, again, I'll use the term learning loss mitigation, has ties to what the money can be used for. And Rhonda in budget updates will be bringing more light to this probably on the 18th and in future board meetings as well. But it is these four priority areas, and this again is taken directly from the CDE's page on learning loss. So you'll see, and again, don't want to read everything to you, it's up here for everybody to view, but there are several different things that we're looking at. Accelerating progress to close those learning gaps. We're looking at extending the instructional school year by making adjustments to either academic calendar, increasing the number of instructional minutes. And again, these things all look very different depending on how we look at these things. And you can imagine when you see some of these things mentioned, what it would take to get some of this done. So we'll get into a little bit more specifics again on the 18th. This is meant to be a very broad overview of what you'll be seeing on the 18th. Also providing academic services for pupils and diagnostic assessments and just diving a little bit more into the supports that we have there. And then on the very bottom one, we're looking at providing those supports to address the barriers to learning, such as we know that this pandemic has caused a loss of access to healthcare, to mental health services, to professional development opportunities. We're looking at all that. And again, this is the state's outline of what these funds are intended for. Next slide, please. So other considerations that we're looking at, and this topic comes up quite a bit in the last several board meetings, and that is expanding the small cohort groups for in-person instruction. And looking at identifying the students who need support and how do we identify that? And again, I reiterate, our instructors are doing a fantastic job of doing these things every day. And that's that first bullet point. The individual teacher, they know who they're engaging and who they're not engaging. They work on increasing that engagement with their students. Looking at grade level teams, we have gone through extensive training through this district and continued training on PLC teams, and that is what we were going to be leaning on through this time more than ever, and really looking at our grade level teams and our school site teams and disaggregating data. I think further on in this presentation, you're going to see every child by name come up, and we're all familiar with that process. That is ongoing as well, and that is happening day to day on all of our campuses, and those conversations between the educators and what our students need. Administrative and counseling teams, marriage and family therapists, and social workers. We also are looking at the word volunteers comes up a little bit in here, and you'll see what we mean by that is when we're talking about extending that instructional time outside of the school day, that does take volunteerism and by our instructors and other people. Now, we are looking at ways and through MOUs, I know that word has come up quite a few times tonight, but we're looking at compensating our educators if they are volunteering their efforts outside of their normal contractual hours as well to meet that need of increasing that instructional day for students. And I believe the next slide I hand off to Dr. Huber.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Again, this is just a very broad overview. You're going to get a much more detailed look at the way we'll be approaching this when we meet back together on the 18th. One of the reasons for that is because this really is an entire district team that is working on these endeavors. You've got the C&I department, the social, emotional, equity coaches at the district level, but then you also have the school site teams, the PLC teams that Mr. Wilson was referring to, as well as the RTI teams, grade level teams, et cetera. And so it's a large task of bringing all those groups together to work on how we're going to tackle these issues. So what they're looking at is grade level interventions. That's obviously mostly at elementary level. And then in terms of perhaps like middle school, we might be looking more specifically at English language arts and mathematics, because we know those are the foundational building blocks that if kids aren't strong in those areas, they struggle in all the other subject areas at secondary. And then also things like study hall, or one of the aspects that comes to us over and over from both teachers and even parents and our administrators is a lot of the struggles at the secondary level is not solely academic. It's simply not getting things done, not following through, or not participating, not engaging. And a lot of the grades now are actually improving, even grades from last semester, because teachers are giving students extra time. They're allowing them to turn things in and then going back, for instance, and changing the grade from first semester because a student finally has completed an assignment or an assessment. So all that currently is ongoing in terms of the way what teachers and administrators are doing to mitigate some of the things that we're struggling with currently. Also, we're looking at outside of our district as well. We are partnering with Sacramento State. They have a tutoring service that we are pairing with to help us also bring more supports into the system. And then even beyond that, we're looking at what other services might be available out there, especially now that we do have some monies that we can use to bring in outside services if necessary to also help with areas that we're struggling with. And again, you'll see a much more robust idea of specifics on the 18th. Next slide, Kelly. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Peace, who's going to tell us about the social emotional aspects.
Good evening, everyone. Before I get into the site specifics, I want to acknowledge our site leaders, teachers, and support staff who are doing an outstanding job in supporting students. At the site levels, we have an emphasis on relationships, routines, and resilience. And the relationship piece may be obvious, but in terms of routines, really giving students an opportunity to co-create norms and giving student voice. Also identifying strategies and activities to integrate SEL with academic content. And again, there are some suggestions there. And the whole child framework is really placing emphasis on supporting academic behavior and social emotional support for our students. But one thing I think often gets lost is the need for adult SEL. Both our staff members, students, and parents have all experienced some level of trauma, and we have to acknowledge that the adults on our campuses also need social emotional support. So really looking at finding ways to create wellness programs for our staff, and also self-care practices, because if educators aren't well, then our students can't be well. So again, I want to acknowledge the hard work that our school sites are doing, and then really redesigning and strengthening the family partnership. You know, parents are experts for their children, and being able to voice their concerns with school sites and have them be heard, valued, and implement some of the ideas and strategies is really important. On a district-wide level, we're looking for digital solutions with our current SEL curriculum, which is second step. I recognize that district-wide, we do not have a consistent SEL curriculum, particularly at the secondary level. So that is something that we're exploring, and just being available and responsive to sites as needed for any given situation. And again, as Dr. Huber and Mr. Wilson have both shared, we can get into the specifics on each of these bullet points at a later date. Next slide.
So in terms of where we're headed in the future, we're also putting together a plan to somewhat bring back a more robust summer program. If you'll recall, over the last couple of years, we actually have scaled back summer school programs, mostly because of budgetary constraints. But again, the monies that are available should help us to bring back what we could almost consider more of a traditional program. And in fact, the last few years, we haven't offered really anything at the elementary level, especially. We did offer what was called the Boost program a couple years ago at the middle school level. And this year, what we're looking at is basically summer programs for all levels: elementary programs, middle school programs, and high school. We would look at doing that virtually for the students that wanted to continue in that vein. But we're really hopeful to, you know, as we're talking about also not only the fall, we're hoping to be able to bring kids back in person also for a summer school program for the kids who would like to be in person. And so we would be doing everything from, you know, at the secondary level remediation work, but also credit recovery, especially for our high school students, in order to get them, you know, back on track if they are kind of falling behind in terms of credit recovery. And then also we would be looking at doing some things to actually hopefully get after the social, emotional, and connectivity aspects of students too. So we'd also be looking at things like the web program, Link Crew, etc. The programs that we normally have in place that help kids as they transition from either elementary to middle or middle to high school. So all those things will also be back on the table, and you'll see a much more robust summer program for all three levels when we come back on the 18th. Next slide, Kelly. And I guess I've somewhat already outlined this, but our next steps is the school site teams in the district office. We are currently working on this in conjunction with each other. And there's ongoing discussions, not just with PLC teams, but RTI teams, grade level teams. And then the detailed plan, we'll have that for a district-wide plan, and then examples for you for what the sites are doing individually as well. Because one of the powerful aspects of PLCs and RTI is that it does honor the fact that our teachers and our administrators at the school sites do understand the unique needs of their school sites. And so some interventions or some models certain schools might choose, while other schools choose different things depending on what they feel their needs are. and how to best serve their kids. And we'll explain that more fully on the 18th. That concludes the presentation.
Okay. We have any board questions?
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. Stark.
Gosh, I sure wish we had this funding back in May or June of last year, because I know that many of our kids with not a summer school program or a very limited summer school program fell behind, and particularly our African American kids and our other students of color that statistically show that they do fall behind at least a grade over the summer. It's good that you guys are getting the summer program together. I just have a question of, is there going to be a capacity issue for our kids signing up for summer school?
We hope not. I mean, it is one of the concerns, to be honest, in terms of staffing is always a concern for summer school.
Right.
And the fact that we are looking at such a robust program, there's going to definitely be need there. And it's probably, I think we can count on the fact that for summer school, we'll probably be having to hire teachers perhaps outside of our district to meet the need. But we hope not. One of the things we're also laying out is, in the past, the summer school program has been hosted at one site, usually at Cordova, and any high school student that needs to go to summer school would go to Cordova for that. This year, we are looking at hosting a program on the Rancho side of the house and on the Folsom side of the house.
Okay.
Same thing in terms of selecting a middle school, Mills or Mitchell, and then also either Sutter or Folsom, just to make it easier in terms of access for kids to get to the school site to receive those interventions and to take those courses.
Okay, great. And I appreciate the information on the social emotional learning and reaching out to our adults as well as our teachers and staff. Are we going to be able to identify those families that we know are falling behind or haven't been in the program? How do we reach out to them? Are we going to do home visits or?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean,
Okay.
really, the schools are well aware of where the struggles are. The first line of defense obviously is the teachers, but as teachers reached out to families or to the students, if the desired result wasn't coming from those interactions, the next step was to get the administration involved, counselors involved, etc. And so many of our schools, until actually we went back into this last lockdown, were doing home visits, etc. And so the schools very much have the data to understand and to know who needs the services, who needs the support. So that finding the students and knowing who we need to reach out to is not an issue.
Okay, thank you. And also the summer food program, I'm assuming that that's going to carry on through the summer. And have we identified sites yet, or is it going to be the same as last year? I know we had quite a few sites.
I believe what we will be probably doing something similar to last year. There might be changes if we determine that maybe we need to pivot to a different site for a different reason. But as far as I understand, the summer program, the feeding program will be in place just as last year.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other board questions? Mr. Reed.
I want to focus in, I guess it's slide 7 on under high school, where the reference third bullet point regarding enrichment. I don't know if this is a possibility or something we might be able to explore. I mean, we're looking at credit recovery, we're looking at summer classes, but is there an opportunity for us to bring students on campus, not for credit recovery, not for a formal summer class, but for those classes where they have been virtual all year and they're missing out on the tactile interaction with certain subject matter of that class? And I think of CTE, for example, or maybe maybe some students registered for a wood working class because they were really excited about working on wood, or the metal class, or welding, or whatever we're providing to students, and they may have an A grade point average of A or B. So it's not that they need credit recovery, but they took that class because they wanted to work with their hands and they never had that opportunity. So even if we were able to identify a week for enrichment for those kids who were in those types of classes that would involve a microscope or a saw or a welding or whatever, so that they can go voluntarily, if it works in their calendar, to go in and put their hands on the type of equipment that they wanted to do all year long. I think that would be a wonderful opportunity if we could find some way to offer that, if it's possible, as a 1 week enrichment that supports what they at least virtually took the prior year. So that's all I wanted to reference. Thank you.
Yeah, I got a bundle of questions. So I guess I'll start on slide 2. There's a reference to this article from August 2020. And I think I take this to mean we've kind of known probably since last March, I assume, that learning loss was a real possibility. So I guess the question is, what, you mentioned we have been doing some things. What have been the interventions that we've put in place already? And what have we learned from those that are going to help us, that we'll adapt from to better them so that we're doing better by our students? Maybe that's a question more for next meeting, but if you can maybe cover that first part of it, that'd be helpful.
Sure, I'm happy to answer that. So we categorize this into 2 different sections here. We're dealing with students that are in distance learning, and we're dealing with students that are in hybrid and that we actually have in front of us at the time. And you're absolutely correct. And I pointed that out when I did this slide, that our educators are aware that this was a possibility and that this was happening. We've been putting together small, and I'm going to read off some notes I have from what we have been doing here. We've been building small groups that are working on specific needs. We have, for our distance learning kids, we have several programs such as Lexia, such as iReady, that help develop certain skills that are identified through assessment and through interactions with their teachers online. We've been making individual contact to parents and students about completing certain tasks that we're not seeing completed, again, to get that engagement piece for these children. Virtual leveled reading groups are happening. Oftentimes on those Mondays or during those asynchronous times, those are also times that teachers are reaching out to different groups of kids to work specifically with them in small groups. Again, this is all distance learning. The group that I'm talking about now, we've implemented reflex math programs. Our BIAs and our academic support coaches and intervention teachers, where we have them at those sites, are also reaching out and working with small groups virtually. Lots of those smaller group sizes outside of the normal that morning synchronous time. That's what that async time is used for. Students are working on their work and also meeting with teachers in smaller groups. We also have community members that are volunteering to read to kinder students and first grade students and other grade levels across the district, and that's been ongoing since we've returned. And we're again looking constantly at what else can we do and how do we engage. And to the question that was asked earlier, we've been doing the knock and talks or the tap and chats with parents that aren't engaging after we've gone through that level of teacher trying to make contact, administrator trying to make contact, our Mr. Meyer trying to make contact, and we keep ratcheting up that contact with those families. In terms of the hybrid, lots of similar things, but again, in person. So we're doing those small groups when we have the children in front of us, and that ability to assess in real time and see what the kids are needing. Targeted use of all the programs that we have and all of our components of the curriculums that we have in place. And let's see what else. Again, a lot of the repeats of what I said in distance learning, but we have more opportunity, or not more, but a different opportunity with that face-to-face contact with a student, because again, nonverbal communication is a huge part of how all of us communicate and a lot of how we tell when a kid is in need of something.
Yeah, so, and thanks for that. It sounds like the smaller groups, smaller cohorts are really have been the critical part of addressing.
It is, and again, even during traditional scheduling, when we have a full complement of kids in front of us, we rely on small groups during that time as well, while kids are working on other things.
Yeah, great. So I hope we do take that into next year. I mean, I certainly don't think this is just a question for the rest of this year. In really rethinking our whole model, I mean, how do we address that? How do we get that moving? So I appreciate that. If those are things that have been working, let's figure out how to push into those more. Page 3 talks about increasing the instructional minutes. I guess I'm wondering a couple of things on that. Number one would be, well, I'll get to the other part, do we see evidence that an increase in instructional minutes has a positive impact on learning?
I think the short answer to that is it depends on what's happening during those instructional minutes. Right now, the instructional minutes, of course, have been, the requirement was pushed down to basically what a minimum day requirement was. So during this pandemic time, when we find ourselves in a hybrid, the state has scaled back the required instructional minutes. So of course, our ability to have to socially distance and has reduced our ability to only have half the class in at a time, which is why we're in an AM/PM model. And then in terms of meeting even those reduced instructional minutes, we're having to add asynchronous time into those cohorts of students when they're not in front of the teacher. So anytime we can get closer back up to the traditional sense of instructional minutes will benefit the student with the learning that would be taking place during that time.
Yeah, in those instructional minutes, we're talking about synchronous instructional minutes.
Yes, well, we're talking about any type of instructional minutes at that time, because we've been seeing some amazing things happen in asynchronous time as well as synchronous times with our students. But what one of these bullet points is getting at is outside of that typical instructional day as well, can we get small groups of students in after school, before school, possibly Saturday schools? Can we increase through things like summer programs and get more instructional time in that year?
Yeah, and that's where I'd be really curious next time the next scheduled board meeting currently, to hear what some of those statistics are about Saturday school, after school cohorts. One of my concerns, particularly right now, is, and especially for secondary, if it's an all online student group, to ask them to do more time online in a small group. I'd be concerned that that's not going to have the impact that we want it to have, or that the resource we're putting it into would ask for. And the same thing would go with the Saturday school. And then how do we balance a student's social emotional versus their educational, wanting them to be out to be able to go play baseball on Saturday, but also asking them to be in the class. So if there are any statistics or studies that could kind of show the efficacy of those, I think that would be really critical. On page 4, we're talking about the volunteers to be compensated. I just wanted to clarify. It says outside of the instructional day.
Correct.
That's not outside of Monday, is it? Is Monday considered an instructional day?
Monday is considered an instructional day. So what we're talking about in this sense is our contractual day of a teacher's work day.
Perfect. After the school hours or the weekend. Thank you for clarifying that. Maybe this is for Ms. Wessinger. Claudia, who called and has called faithfully, mentioning something about her grandson and the promise to get him back in school. And we're talking about learning loss. I don't think we can ignore the fact that most of our special ed cohorts are not in the classroom, as far as I understand. So I'm wondering, is there any reason we can't have them back in the classroom right now? What's holding us back from doing that?
Good evening. Actually, most of our cohorts are open. So it's not just a few of our cohorts. When we actually have about 130 cohorts, if we're talking about just special day classes only. And when we opened in October, we opened only 60 cohorts. And again, that was due to lack of staffing. And then when we opened elementary, the elementary cohorts then also opened. So the only cohorts that aren't open are some of the secondary cohorts. So some of the cohorts were able to open and some weren't. So right now we have about 30 out of the 130 that are not open. And as we were discussing earlier, in order to get those open now, they either would open when we open secondary, or if we want to get them open before that, it would be renegotiating the MOU.
Okay, well, I think that we ought to do that if that's the case. There's no reason in February that, I mean, a kid like Claudia's grandson isn't in class when he needs it. So
Yes,
I
I
would ask,
agree.
I would ask that we do renegotiate that, whatever that means. If we can talk about that, opening that back up, I think that would be really important. Couple of others for me. One critical thing, and hopefully there'll be some more specifics on the 18th that I would want to know about is, I know we've talked a lot about D's and F's, and I know that's not the only way we're measuring learning loss. So what are the metrics we're currently talking about using to measure whether or not we're successful at addressing learning loss?
And currently we're using multiple metrics. So you're exactly right. The DNF rate is not the only thing that tells us, how much learning is taking place and whether or not a student is being successful. And so we want to use multiple measures as we're figuring out, what students need, and especially in terms of the programs that we might be offering moving forward, or what they might take during the summer session, et cetera. We definitely want to use multiple measures to determine that, and that will be shared out in the presentation on the 18th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I'd be curious. I mean, I'm not sure what else there is to look at, so I'm really curious how we're going to be able to measure. Thanks for addressing that. I think it was Ruth who mentioned she has a child at Vista, and the learning experience itself has been, it sounds like much better because she's seeing the students seeing their teacher every day. Obviously, Vista has a block schedule. That's not going to be possible for every school that we have. But it does make me think of the block schedule. And at least as far as I see it, it seems like a great model for learning loss mitigation now and moving forward. I'm wondering, take a topic like credit recovery. Can you kind of just help me understand, is that in a block schedule, is credit recovery an easier thing to accomplish, the same, more difficult?
No, there's more opportunities because in a block, students are taking 8 classes a year. Whereas, for instance, unless a student at Folsom High School takes a 0 period, they're taking 6 courses a year. Cordova is a little different. They take 7 because of the IB and the requirements that are part of IB. And so there are opportunities there in terms of students getting ahead. I think also, I want to say it was my second year with this district. Cordova High School went through about a 1.5 year process also at looking whether or not we would move to a block schedule. So especially, Mr. Short, Mr. Clark, you'll definitely remember that. And one of the things that team from that school, discovered was a lot of the research showed really clearly that there were schools that were block scheduled that were doing amazingly well. And there were schools that have block schedules that are doing amazingly poorly. And there were schools at 6 period days that were doing amazingly well, and schools, the thing that came down to was not the schedule, it was the teaching that happened within the schedule, and then whatever interventions and connections teachers put together for students. So each schedule has its pluses and minuses. There are students that don't thrive in block schedule. It's intense, and the pace is very fast, and so there's always pros and cons to any schedule. But
Sure.
but yeah, in terms of that question, the fact that you're covering 8 courses a year by its very nature can accelerate you much quicker. And if I flunked my English class first term, I literally could take that same 9th grade English class again starting in January. And so that is a benefit in that regard.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, what was the impetus for looking at the block schedule a couple of years ago?
A lot of times, actually, you know what? I was brand new to the district, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was Mr. Godwin who wanted us to consider it. And so, yeah, I believe it was at his direction. Mr. Wilson, if you recall, or Mr. Short, or Mr. Clark.
It was, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Great. And I can say more about this, I guess, in comments, but I do think we ought to have every option on the table right now. If we have we have a huge amount of students that are getting D's and F's, some of the 9th, 10th, 11th graders that aren't going to be able to make those up in time. And if a block schedule allows them to graduate on time or close to on time, and I mean, I think we really ought to take a look at what would it take to implement that if it's plausible. So I appreciate those answers. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later. One last thing, I guess, is that well, I'll save that. That's it for me for now. Thank you.
Okay. Any other board questions?
I got just a couple. Just in terms of funding, what are we using to fund these programs? And are we using CARES dollars, or I just trying to get clarification on that.
Yeah. Superintendent?
We would be using the CARES dollars.
Yeah.
We received an allocation in the fall, and now we've received a new allocation. We haven't, I don't think, actually received it, but it's estimated in the governor's proposal.
Okay.
And Rhonda, if you want to speak any more specifically to the estimated amount, feel free to.
I believe the estimated amount as of right now is about $10 million. Dr. Kaligian is correct. We have not actually received any actual funds yet, nor have we received any additional details in terms of, is there an application involved? Is there going to be another tool such as the learning continuity plan that we had in the fall with the first round of CARES dollars? So there really is quite a few details yet to come, but this is the first step in planning on how to use those dollars.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see here. All right, I appreciate that. So, I mean, this is one-time dollars, so this is not something that we're planning necessarily moving forward, but for this year at least, this is the goal. Okay. Just getting back to Mr. Huey's point about special education and Ms. Wessinger, I know explained some of this, but it got me thinking, which is always a bad thing. The elementary MOU kind of solved the issue for the special needs classes in elementary level, it seems like. The secondary MOU, I assume, will solve those same issues. So I guess my question is, when we meet in a few days to talk about 6th grade, my assumption is that moves up the timeline for the secondary MOU, because we're not going to have an MOU for 6th grade and an MOU for 7th through, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I know we haven't talked through all these things yet, but it seems like if we can move up that timeline for the secondary MOU and get that done, that will solve it itself, essentially, without the need to reopen the cohort negotiation. I just want to throw that out there and see if I'm thinking about that correctly.
Well, I believe in the elementary MOU, we took out some of the wording that had voluntary, and that solved it. So secondary,
it would be the same path.
Okay.
We
Okay.
transition from cohort to
okay.
hybrid.
Okay. So, and were we to hit 25 cases per 100,000 on Monday, and then figure out whatever the state timeline is for reopening, I mean, wouldn't that suggest that we would need a secondary MOU done before we reopened?
We would need to do that. Yes,
Okay.
That would be on our plate.
Okay. And then my last question, just again thinking about the block schedule, it obviously is more rigorous, but Jim, would you say that while the block schedule is more rigorous, and I know that sometimes is used as a reason for why, some students may not like it as much, it also gives students more time to make things up as well. So it kind of could help as well. I don't know.
I wouldn't say it's more rigorous.
Okay.
It's faster paced.
Okay.
And so it's just they are covering more material in a shorter amount of time. And so for instance, my son really struggled Gage, I hope you're okay with me sharing this. But reading literacy was tough for my son, and so he had to put in just a ton of time, and he had to work his rear end off because we are so literacy based in education. And so out of my 3 kids, they all did well, but it was really tough on my son. And we had several conversations about him going to work with me at Cordova and moving him to Cordova just so he would not be in that accelerated program.
Sure.
And we had to get some extra help and things to help him be successful. And he did. He was successful, but that is an aspect. So it's not more rigorous. It's just the pacing that makes it difficult for a lot of students.
Kind of like quarter system versus semesters, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
If I could add though, I mean that makes a lot of sense, and I guess we could have a different discussion about this. I don't mean to derail it, but the flip side is that you're only looking at 4 classes instead of 6, 7, or 8. So
yeah, so that's helpful. Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay. Mark? No. Oh, good. You're good. I just have a couple questions. It seems like everybody's asked a lot of good questions. I was at the delegate assembly CSBA meeting the other day. Ms. Clark was there, and we had like 10 different districts there in the Sacramento region, and we talk about learning loss. And as soon as I said learning loss, they said learning loss. No, it's really disengagement. The majority of what they're saying is across the board is a trend that high school kids, I'm talking more secondary, they check out. They start off a little bit disengaging, and the number of students hasn't really increased across the board on the average. It was more that they're just disengaging more and more and more. And so we wanted to call it more disengagement, not necessarily, the curriculum, what the teachers are doing, everything else. They're doing the best kid, but you got teenage kids in the high school. What do you think they're going to do? If the parents are not there to supervise, especially for essential workers, parents are working, both are not there, unsupervised, they go out and play, they just totally disengage. With that said, I mean, there's a lot of more complexity to it. I mean, there is across the board a lot of different, but that was kind of the growing trend, right, Mr. Clark? That's what they were talking about.
Yeah.
The thing that they really wanted to talk about, or really what thought would be the best, is to get the kids back engaged. I mean, I hear that we are escalating. The teacher knows who's not logging in and then dropping out or just not coming back on. Not so they know who they are, teachers. Then I hear that we're escalating it to the principal, and the principal goes to another team. That seems like that's kind of spread thin, and it takes time to do that. And I've brought this up before several times that what is our contact success rate? What is our engagement rate? Do we have a matrix to measure that rate? And there are districts that are really going to focus on how do you get to those kids? Who are we at? There is different models out there. I know my father was a teacher back in the day. The teachers don't have the time to find out and call and chase out these kids. So they created what's called a community liaison, a dedicated staffer that the community in certain subgroups would trust. And they would go to the house calls and make those house calls, and they will allow them into the house. There are some that in some of our groups I hear that they would not trust anybody going out to there, and you would just knock on the door or call or whatever. They're never going to respond back. That's where the response rate is. But if they know the community liaison or somebody that's dedicated per school site, there you have a better success rate. So that's why I'm asking, what are we doing for success rate? There's the possibility that we can get a dedicated person or a community liaison that will engage students and work with parents and work with people to get a better success rate. And so, do we have a metrics on that? Do we have anything on that? That's my question.
So we have a multitude of metrics on this from all the schools right now, and it is starting with the schools. So first thing that comes to mind right now when you're talking about that trusted person is often that teacher who's reaching out. And again, if that's unsuccessful, our principals have excellent relationships and our APs with our parents, and they are doing home visits. They are knocking on doors. They're being invited in, and those are happening daily. We also have our parent coordinators at our sites that are doing reach out to these families, to these parents as well, and they're keeping track of who they're making contact with and who they aren't. And that is when we are escalating things. But from a day-to-day basis, We have principals daily making contact with parents at their houses, knocking on the doors, out in the community. Um, Back a few months ago, when things were a little stricter, we were setting up shop in parking lots of grocery stores with a marriage family therapist, the AP, the principal, a couple teachers, to get supplies out to students and engage with those families that couldn't get to the campus for whatever reason. The schools are tracking that information and where these students, how often we're getting a hold of them, and what the issue is, and trying to take down those barriers for those families.
So do we have a success rate?
We are getting more successful. There are those students that all measures are failing for. We cannot engage the families, and at that point, we are stepping up that as well, and involving Mr. Meyer's office, and taking.
Possibly you could bring some of that data back for the board to see.
We can certainly, yeah, have the.
If there's a
Yep.
comprehensive approach,
Absolutely, and that goes back to Dr. Huber's comment on each school site and knowing the culture of their school and what's working for the individual families. I'm pulling up one of the for engagement. This is the same thing. I'll read a couple of comments of things that are currently happening for engagement right now, and that is the teacher and the principal phone calls, exploration of needed resources for the families if they are engaging with us and saying, well, this is why we're not engaging, or this is why my student is engaging. We are providing what they need, and ask if possible, if we can. When that phone call isn't working or that check-in isn't working, they're saying that they are walking right to the family's houses and knocking on the doors. They're also sending positive postcards home to the parents and kids who are engaged, and thanking them for that, and sending out the notes to families that aren't and asking them to please engage. What else is happening here? I'm reading through the list of things that they are doing, but yeah, we are happy to bring back. In fact, we can make that part of the 18th
that would
discussion.
be great, because a track and trace seems like the biggest part of the disengage. They're not engaging. So, what kind of effort and what success rate metrics we're using?
Yeah,
I think it'd be good information to have.
Definitely.
That's my only question I have. Well, I think we have a lot of questions. So this is just a discussion item. Let's go out to the public. Do we have any raised hands? Or
Yes.
okay.
We do have a few. The first is Jen.
Hey, Jen, you there?
Yeah, hi. So this is Jen Tarbox. So thank you again for letting us speak. And though I really would love to talk about like my daughter and her needs right now and her dreams for university as a sophomore, I really think this time I need to spend on the special needs program. And for example, my nephew. So he is a student at Folsom High in the special needs program. And this is the one where students stay until they're 22 years old. This is the life skills program. So previously, when you were talking about adding instructional minutes for the other students, that's for, a different thing. But I really do think you should consider adding instructional minutes for those special needs programs. You have kids that were going to age out at 22. You have children that were going to age out this past year that have regressed greatly because they've missed an entire year of that program. First, I would like to ask, will those children who are technically aged out get another year because they needed that? And not only that, open up the special needs program to their home school. So for example, my nephew, who is technically going to be a junior, he's not getting on a bus to go to Rancho every day to go to his program over the summer. Over the summer, I would like you guys to consider a way to get those special needs programs at Vista, at Folsom, at Rancho for all the students, because they have regressed greatly, whether it's with speech or a million other things that these students have going on. They need to be a huge consideration. And I really would like, possibly if there is a way to let the students that would have aged out of that program to get one more year, because what our students miss and what my daughter and my son have missed can't even compare to what these students who struggle with speech and just basic learning skills are missing out on, and the regression that has taken place for them. So I please consider that and something that can be done for those students when you guys are making your next decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is going to be Jennifer's iPad.
Jennifer, are you there?
Hi, this is Jennifer Barclay again. And while I definitely agree with Jen Tardox in terms of her, again, voicing opinion around special education, um, my daughter, she really has an ideal. She has an ideal learning situation to be a distance learner. And yet she's an average student without any disability, learning disabilities or issues or concerns, but yet is still having difficulty, as I mentioned earlier. However, I heard, I think it's Mr. Huber, not Hoover, Huber, speaking to interventions and using asynchronous time to further engage with students. And maybe it's because my daughter doesn't have all Fs and she only has 2 Fs and a D, 2 Ds, and is barely passing in, a majority of her classes. Maybe it's because of that she hasn't been reached out to for those interventions. Monday is not an intervention day, at least as far as I'm concerned. Monday is a day where she has 20 minutes with her um, advisory and then has the rest of the day to do homework on her own. Her only intervention time is during her lunch hour, 4 days a week, and she has 6 classes. She can't possibly have that connection that is being spoken to or spoken of. It's not happening. I don't think that's real. So I just wanted to share that. That's from a parent who has a student. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Chris.
Chris, you there?
I'm here. Thanks. Just a couple of things. One addition from the presentation was a discussion of the magnitude of the problem we're trying to deal with. I think it would be helpful if perhaps one of the board members could direct staff to let us know some indicators of the severity of learning loss, severity of the issue we're dealing with. I think a great stat that I think people actually deserve to understand, to Jennifer's point on the last call, is how many students in high school are receiving Ds and Fs? How many students are receiving multiple Ds and Fs? And what kind of increase is that over, let's say, last year or year before, traditionally? Second, the magnitude of the problem, as I understand it, based on anecdotal information, should also prompt you to think whether or not the actual fundamental delivery of the education is working or not. Whether fundamental changes need to be made because of the significant number of students who are failing academically, who can't be reached, who are suffering from social and emotional problems. Third, President Short, I think your insightful questions at the end of your comments regarding asking for information about what has worked and what has not worked in the intervention to this point, those aren't just good to have, those are critical. And on the 18th, I would really hope the board staff comes back and says, here's what we tried, here's what metric we used to decide whether or not it's worked, and here's what's worked and what hasn't. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Carissa.
Carissa, you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me all right?
No, can you turn it up or get closer to your speaker microphone?
There we go. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. I was thinking there needs to be some clarification or distinction made of what the cohorts actually look like for elementary versus secondary, as well as mild mod and mod severe. I think everyone is getting this idea that it is going to look like specialized academic instruction, this lovely one-on-one time in the cohorts in person, and that is not how it's delivered, not at middle school. The kids are in a cohort. We have one on campus. There is an adult present, a teacher. They are still attending their classes online. So while they are on campus, they are still Zooming and attending their classes online, and we're not seeing any more success rates than if they were at home. They're still struggling to complete their online assignments. There's not as much one-on-one time or interaction as it's believed to be. And they are really just Zooming in person on a campus and not getting this one-on-one time. We're finding that intervention and asynchronous time is allowing for more specialized academic instruction than our cohort is, which is on campus. The intervention time is allowing us to do small group, 1 to 2 kids, asynchronous as well. And we're getting that undevoted time to just focus on them, and they can speak with us and get the help that they need, versus our cohort is in a room with other students. We're facing the same issues of they're all doing different classes. It's hard to follow with what they're doing. They're afraid to ask for help still. We're not finding it to be as effective as we would like it to be. And I think we just need to make the distinction that the elementary cohorts and the middle school ones look vastly different in terms of levels of support. And unfortunately, the secondary program is just not able to afford as much support and individualized instruction as we'd like, because the bottom line is they're still doing classes online. They're just sitting in a room and Zooming and attending their own class, unlike the elementaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers? One more?
Yes, we have another. Her name is Meg.
Meg, are you there? Hello? Meg, you there?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, can you hear me? I'm sorry about that. Pushed the wrong
Okay.
button. I just wanted to bring a couple of things to your guys' attention. You may or may not know. Anyone that has kids probably do understand. Thankfully, my kids are doing great, but I sit in these meetings more to advocate for the kids throughout Cordova and Folsom, as well as through California. I just wanted to bring something to attention. I have brought up different things along the way to their teachers. My son was in 3rd grade in March, pretty much never had more than an hour conversation a week with this teacher after March. Long multiplication, in addition to just multiplication, and completely was fell off the books. So he came into this year doing division with the teacher in no way, shape, or form realizing somehow that these kids have completely lost multiplication and have completely skipped over long division. So I just want everyone to realize that a D and an F means nothing to what we're going to see in the long term as the years go on, and things like long multiplication, those skills that will rear their head again. It will come and get us later. So I just wanted to bring that up, as well as maybe bring up some points around the older kids, maybe some peer engagement. Like we keep talking about like the learning. How about let's get these kids excited about seeing each other, seeing other humans, make them excited for something. My son can do class, sit on a video game, watch a TV, and do his homework at the same time. He's getting A's and B's. That is disengagement. And that is what he was speaking of earlier. And how do you have someone with straight A's as a parent? What are you going to say? Sit and look at your screen for the next 6 hours? You good?
Sorry, you ran out of time. Thank you for your comments. Any other speakers?
No other hands are raised.
Okay, we'll bring this back to final board comments. Any final board comments? Okay, we're hearing none. This is a discussion item. I think, thank you for everybody's comments. We're going to move on to the next.
I do have some comments. Sorry.
Oh, this is final comment.
Okay.
Ollie, do you have any?
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I would just emphasize that even some students who are earning A's are also experiencing some form of learning loss. Because in some classes it's easy, it's just all about completing assignments, and sometimes learning isn't exactly taking place. I don't know how you would address these problems. That's a whole nother issue, but I guess just ensuring that foundations are met for math and English and science, and possibly testing for that learning loss in the fall in some capacity, and just going from there and then deciding further action.
Okay, thank you. You want to do a final comment?
Yeah, final comments. I guess number one, Ms. Wessinger, I just want to thank you for the update. it's encouraging to hear that we have so many more students back on campus. It's also concerning that we have further to go. Carissa, I also want to thank you for clarifying that it may look different than we actually think it does. I think that's really important that we all know that. And if that's the case, I wonder if just Ms. Wessinger, if maybe you can add to the learning loss discussion on the 18th with what we can be doing with our special ed cohorts, maybe to increase the engagement, decrease the learning loss, whatever that may be. So that would be one request. Secondly, I do think, again, we are in this spot where everything should be on the table. So two things with that. I would just request the district office in this discussion about learning loss come to the table with some more information about the efficacy of a block schedule versus a regular schedule, the cost difference between the two, and what we might experience in terms of credit recovery and just the future of these cohorts that are, these classes that are in school right now. So I would like some information around that. I know that's a big ask, but it's something I think we need to explore if we think it might work better. And one more thing I would like to ask, I don't think we can acknowledge, or we can't talk about learning loss without acknowledging that the hybrid model that our secondary students are currently in is not ideal for learning. When they're getting 40% of the instructional time as they typically would, of course, we're in this situation that we're in. And so I'm not sure when we can get there, but to kind of, I guess, board member Clark's point about having this plan B, I think it's really critical. And I would ask the district office to come to our next meeting on the 18th with a plan for when we can get there, what it would look like to open a full 5 days a week this year, if this year allows. The sooner we can get to the 5 days, the better. It may take months, it may take till next fall, but if we don't have a plan in place for it and we have the opportunity to do it, we're being irresponsible to our students. So I would like to see that. What would be the plan for the secondary schedules if we were at some point in this year to be able to open a full 5 days a week? I really don't want us to see us in a place where we get the go ahead from the state and we're not prepared to actually do anything about it. So if we can have that on the 18th as a discussion item, I'd appreciate that. That's all. Thank you.
Hoover? Yeah, just a couple comments. First off, I think I just want to echo Mr. Hui. I would love to get an analysis or a study on what it would not only do for learning loss to implement a block schedule, but also what it would take to make that happen. I know that that's difficult, but I also know that in these times, we have done things that we never thought were possible. We have done things that we never thought were feasible to make decisions on the fly, adjusting to all of the craziness of last year. And it seems to me like we've done the studies, we've already analyzed so much of this regarding the block schedule and its benefits and its costs. And I think that information still holds true. So would love to get a report on that. And then, I agree with Mr. Hu as well. I think the day that we sign or whatever, the day we sign that secondary MOU is the day we start negotiating a 5-day schedule, just plain and simple. I don't see any reason why we should wait another second to start talking about a non-hybrid or even a 5-day hybrid schedule this school year. I know that that's probably a lot to ask for, but I think that we need to have goals that are sometimes lofty in order to achieve the best that we can achieve. And so I would agree with that. I think, I understand that we've been negotiating the secondary MOU for a long time, that it is going to be the fastest way to get our kids in the classroom. But the day that we implement that is the day that we need to start talking about what is next, because it's not enough. That's it for me.
Mr. Clark.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Right? Yeah. Okay, this is a discussion item, so I think that's it. Ollie, you have any last final comments? None? Okay. Let's move on to our school boards, item C, 11C, California School Board Association Board Evaluation Tool. Superintendent?
Yes, this item is coming back to the board after we had some initial discussion at our board study session on January 9th. And it was a request to look at tools to implement a board self-evaluation. And we talked about CSBA offering the service and the tool. So they offer a couple of different options for conducting a self-evaluation. The first step is completion of that electronic survey. And then the districts can either review the results on their own using the guidance that CSBA provides, or they also offer the option of having a consultant to help walk you through the feedback alongside them.
Okay.
Not sure what the cost is. We asked and haven't received a response, but it'll differ depending on which direction, which of those two options. So we thought we'd ask the board that, and it's a discussion item. So if you have direction for us to pursue, if there's consensus one way or the other, we can get more specifics by the next meeting.
Okay. All right. So it's board questions.
Mr. President,
Ms. Clark. Yeah.
I'm good either way with that. I think it's long overdue to have a board self-evaluation. I think the last time I had one, I think was in 2017. I think my second year on the board. I don't know if you remember that, Ed. But I think it's long overdue, and it's something that we need just to get acquainted with, our governance style and how we govern as a board. So any way we do it, it's fine with me.
Okay. Any other board questions? Mr. Reed, Mr. Hoover? Yeah, I would just kind of echo what Mr. Clark says. I think it's healthy to do a self-evaluation. I think that it might be even worthwhile to hire the services of CSB because I've seen them before and they're really good. And just like when we did our workshop, that was really good too. So I think it'd be healthy to explore that and come back to the board and see what we can do there. Okay. I think it's time to do that.
Okay, we'll bring that back then with that information.
Okay. Is there any public comment on that one? No, bring it back. Allie? Did she speak up? I saw. Okay. Nobody? Okay. Hearing none. Bring back any final board comments. That's just okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to our last item, 11D. First read adopt revisions to E5145.71, Title 9, Sexual Harassment Complaint Procedure. Superintendent?
Yes, this exhibit goes alongside the board policy that the board took a look at last meeting and approved tonight under the consent, and reflects the new language about Title IX. And it also identifies that our designated coordinators in the district for listening to Title IX complaints would be Mr. Wilson and Dr. Huber. So unless there's any specific questions, this would come back for action at the next meeting.
Okay, any board questions?
That's pretty standard. No.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah, I just have one question, and this may be standard format, so that's been recommended by CSBA, but I see employees' email addresses here, both Jim Huber as well as Mr. Wilson, and then we also have Ms. Dagnall. Every time someone changes a position, we're going to have to update this. Would it at all make sense to create a generic FCUSD email that's maybe title9@fcusd.org so that whoever's in those positions will automatically get it, and we won't have to go in each time to change an email address and update the exhibit? Just a thought.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's part of federal program.
This is
requirement.
right. So one of the updates of this and a part of the exhibit and the previously approved policy is that it no longer can be a position or a
a generic email address. It has to specifically name the person and the title in that position. So correct, you will have to update this every time there is a change in those positions or email addresses.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, no other questions? Any public comment, any?
No, no raised hands.
Hearing back, it sounds like we don't have any final board comments. I think we're done with our discussion items. Thank you for the board and everybody else participating in that. It was a really good discussion. Number 12, reports of the Board of Education, Superintendent report.
Yes, I have a couple of points I'd like to share tonight. February, there are lots of events that happen. Many celebrations occur. But one of the most significant and one that I want to focus on tonight is celebrating Black History Month in our district. Black history is part of U.S. history and therefore should be celebrated and highlighted not only in the month of February, but year round. And the founding of Black History Month and the celebration of Black excellence was established to acknowledge the many achievements and contributions of Black Americans. In Folsom, Cordova, we acknowledge all of our young Black scholars, staff, and community members. Your perseverance, endurance, resilience, and dedication inspires all of us. Secondly, I also want to recognize our students, our staff, our families, again, for the hard work that's happening. Just the example of how we've seen our COVID safety plans having to pivot to the new guidance that we have. That doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen by just thinking about it. It happens because of the hard work of a lot of people. And we heard Miss Saran tonight, and I know she's worked hours on that, but so have so many other people. And that's just one example. And I just want to publicly recognize that because it does, people are going above and beyond in ways that we haven't before to comply with the changing standards as we receive them. And I know it's hard when we get different guidance and, we want to stay the course and we want a message that this is the way it's going to be. And it's sometimes hard to keep up, as we're sifting through all, the changes. And we're sifting through what is hopeful, what's happening, and what's just changed. And sometimes that communication piece is hard to keep up with all of that. But one thing that we can assure you that is, as our public, our community has questions, please continue to ask us. And we want to provide that information and, and make it as helpful as possible. But we know that information is coming fast and furious. It changes often, especially these days. But we are committed to doing that. So, please continue to reach out to myself, to our communications department, to our school sites, to our teachers, to our principals, that we're there to support. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to board correspondence. So I'll start with Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I just have two things to mention tonight. The first is I had a conversation with a parent this week, and she basically asked me, can you and the board and the district team try to instill hope in the kids, show progress to accomplish something more than the status quo that they're experiencing right now. And one of the things that she suggested I really liked, which is, and this in example, it deals with the CTE building at Folsom High, but it really, I think, could apply to probably any high school and potentially any program, where you, at the very least, create an opportunity while we're in distance learning for the kids to come over and at least get on the campus and look at their classrooms, like tour the buildings. And it may not be, obviously in groups of 15 or 30, but it could be potentially in groups of 5, where they have the ability to visualize, the classrooms, see their teacher in person. Even if it's just for 20 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is, at least it's providing hope in seeing that we're progressing in a positive direction. And anyway, I thought it was a very interesting observation, a very interesting suggestion. So I just wanted to share that. It doesn't seem to me to be unreasonable, and anything that provides um, light at the end of the tunnel for our students to see things are getting better is a good thing. So the only other thing I just wanted to report on is it was actually the day after the last board meeting. Um, Superintendent Collegian and I toured Folsom Middle School and met with Principal Daniels. And I very much appreciated that opportunity and enjoyed the conversation with Principal Daniels, and being able to stop in on a couple of classrooms and stick my head in, or our heads in, to see the virtual learning and chat with some of the teachers. So just wanted to extend my appreciation for that. So that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Hoover.
Thank you. Well, I definitely agree with Mr. Reed. I think progress is important, and I think we made a little bit tonight, but we're not there yet. I think after this year, we have a very steep hill to climb, and I think all we can do is keep putting, one hand in front of the other, and just keep doing everything we can to get our students back in the classroom. I know. First, I want to thank the staff, because I know, just looking through my notes here, we threw a lot at them tonight, and talking about getting our renegotiating our cohort contract. Reporting back on Coronado and what they're doing, legal options against the states, opening sixth grade, moving back the registration timeline, and it just keeps going. So, I realize that these are significant things, and that these are not typically, we wouldn't want all of these different things, trying to figure them all out at the same time. But this is a very unique time, and it just calls for, again, as we've discussed and said many times tonight, every option to be on the table. So I heard from a lot of families in the last couple weeks, and just my heart goes out to all of them. It's so frustrating to see schools all over the country, all over the state, in your own community especially, operating safely, and yet we are not open. It's frustrating to hear the CDC director say our schools can be open safely, and not only that, but that they're safer than the community at large, according to their studies, and yet our students are still at home. And it's frustrating when, as a parent, you watch every single day the very real mental health and academic impacts that this year is having on your kids. And no doubt the academic inequities that have surely grown as a result of our schools being closed to in-person instruction. And so I'm very thankful tonight to hear the support from this board to get our kids back to the classroom. But I want to keep emphasizing how urgent we need that to happen. Not all of it is in our hands, but we just can't let off the gas. We have to keep going. And I can't say it enough how much I support a traditional schedule in the fall, and how much I want to get as much in-person instruction this school year as well as possible. And I hope that we're able to continue to make progress every week. Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of things. One, I want to thank Elena Cabrera for having me at her DLAC meeting. It was very informative, and I actually have a couple of phone meetings planned with two parents next week. So I'm decided to get more feedback from them and see how we as a district can support them. Want to give a shout out to Caitlin Dunn out at Russell Ranch. Thank you for the invitation. I know it's been a few weeks or maybe a month, that you sent that to me. But now that my schedule is starting to lighten up a little bit, I will be out to hang out with our special need kids. Wanted to let those parents know if you have a student who is a senior, I am offering a scholarship of $500 for a student at Cordova, Vista, and Folsom in honor of my mom. So if you want more information, just talk to your counselor about the Clark Family Memorial Scholarship and get your application in. Other than that, sir, I'm good. Great meeting. My last statement of the evening would be hashtag let them play.
Like that. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Chewy.
Well, I acknowledge what Mr. Hoover shared just a moment ago, that district staff, we realize we're asking for a heavy lift these next couple of weeks. It's an urgent time, as we've all mentioned, and it's going to take a lot of creativity and hard work. So in advance, thank you for all those extra hours you will be putting in and for the work that you've been doing. We really do appreciate it. Just a couple other acknowledgments. First of all, I just wanted to publicly acknowledge Kelly Goldsmith, Dr. Kalikian's administrative assistant. Thank you for your hospitality, your service, your joy. You've made my transition onto this board very easy and smooth, and I really appreciate what you bring. So thank you. And lastly, just wanted to also recognize Carrie Kay for all your hard work and the leadership you're providing the district. Like we just talked about with the district office, you've been asked to respond to an extraordinary time, and I think you've been doing an extraordinary job at it. So thank you for all your hard work. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay. I just don't want to keep this short. I'm really excited that the board, as you can see from the public, that we're very supportive of going back to the traditional 5-day. I think that's our number one goal. That's why I'm here with a sense here. And I think that's very important to get back as possible, as regular as possible. But again, we'll do the best we can with what we got where we're at, and hopefully. And I'm so thankful for the staff we have here, the superintendents and the administration and all the teachers doing whatever it takes to make this happen. We're in a recovery of a major pandemic. And just like we were saying earlier, that's a very dynamic situation. We have to be flexible. We have to be open-minded. We have to do whatever it takes to make that happen. But as if we cannot continue not to have kids in school, it's just not going to work. And so I'm really thankful for the leadership that this board is being provided right now. So I'm thankful for that, and I thank my colleagues here for that. And also, on second thought, sports. I did get a call from or an email from a parent about the golf, and that brought to my mind. Hopefully, maybe our next board meeting or next board meeting, how CIF is rolling out, the non-contact sports and hashtag playing the kids. We really need to probably talk about really what we're doing for sports, and I think that's also a critical part of the social emotional part for our kids is being participatory in the sports. And with that said, I know Mr. Clark, I don't know if this is the appropriate time to talk, but maybe staff or can look in and supporting Mr. Clark in becoming a CIF member. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I discussed it with Dr. Kalikian already, and I did let her know that I was hoping to get the board support as I applied for their board on the CIF.
Yes.
Their CIF board. So the filing date was March 15th. I just went ahead and filed today, not knowing if I needed board support or not. So I've discussed it with Dr. Kalikian already.
Well, you hardly got my support. I don't know about the board here, but
Ditto.
Okay, I think it's important to have somebody like Mr. Clark on that board.
Yes.
So it seems like you got the support.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I just want to put hashtag play, right?
Let them play.
With that said, I don't have anything else. Yes. Allie, sorry. You're so high up there. I can't.
I know.
Go ahead.
Just a thank you to everyone, students, teachers, staff, parents, for continuing to put in the hard work. I did just want to address the inequity that most school sports are in cohorts and practicing, but our arts programs are still stuck. I brought this up at the last meeting, but I think it's important that we're providing opportunities for all students and allowing arts programs like theater, band, choir, etc. to meet and practice because they are just as important. I'm a total athlete. I'm almost 6 feet tall, so I love sports and I play volleyball for the school, but I really want to advocate for those art students. And with that said, I just hope everyone has a safe weekend and stay safe, and I'm optimistic for the future. And shout out to Mr. Clark as well. Hashtag let them play.
Thank you, ma'am. And yes, I will let you know that I'm a big supporter of the VAPA program. So we got to get that up and running too. I'm missing those plays. So
Me too. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Allie, for that. All right, with that said, I'm asking for adjournment. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.